consistently been telling public pollsters that the economy and inflation were the most important issues to them. So let's take a look at who these voters said they trusted more on each of these issues. On the economy, it is former President Trump who has an edge here over Vice President Harris on trust on this particular issue.
Damn, they got a little poll up and it said who do you trust the most to take care of the economy?
She is leading him as it relates to trust on abortion. And on immigration, that's the flip side of the coin. That is the issue that former President Trump has hammered now for months. He is leading her not quite by double digits at this point. I want to bring in Chuck Todd to talk through all of these numbers. And let me just start with this. The grain of salt, because I think it's important that people know. These are early numbers. These numbers likely will change. This is just the first wave of data coming into us. We have more data coming in as well. But at 5 o'clock Eastern, so over the course of the last hour, is when you see that drop, basically, of the exit poll information. You've been in our systems. You've been taking a look at all of it. Tell me what's standing out to you.
Well, there's a couple of things. A big one right now is just, and this is across the battleground states, and I'm going to be generalized here because we always want to be careful for all the caveats that you put.
I have 10 people. I have 10 people watching already. Goddamn.
Either of the two major parties. That is a big deal. Like overall, we believe if you just look at the two major parties.
I literally just started this shit. I got 20 people watching.
There's a slight Republican registration advantage over the Democrats by about a point. But the largest cohort is non-party.
I gotta see if I can hear myself. I got myself on mute.
And then we ask you ask people what party do they belong to, Democrat, Republican, or something else independent. But then we ask what's your ideology, liberal, conservative, moderate. This is if this poll is right, this would be more people are identifying as moderate in this poll than in any of the previous elections featuring Donald Trump, and fewer people are identifying as conservative than any election featuring Donald Trump. The liberal number is actually pretty stagnant. Pretty neutral there. What does that mean? Look, you talk to our pollsters and they'll tell you the moderate number is everything. Democrats always win moderates by a big number. The question is, can they win it by 20 plus points or to offset, some of their partisan disadvantages there? And the independent number is a big deal because Democrats did not do well in the voter registration front throughout the last 4 years. It was Republicans who did much better in the voter registration. It means she has to win independents. And the fact that there are more people identifying as independent, I think even raises the stakes even more that might be the single most crucial voting group we deal with tonight.
You also talk about the divide between men and women. We've been talking about this gender gap for a while, and we can take a look now at how gender gap breaks down on issue. And I want to just be clear on the state of democracy issue, which again, according to these early exit polls, number one, they could change. Number two, just because a candidate is leading on the top issue does not mean that they win, but it can cut both ways depending on if you're a Republican or a Democrat.
Well, it does, and I want to tell people, we offered 5 choices on issues, okay? 4 of them are specific issues: economy, abortion, immigration, and foreign policy. The 5th is this umbrella issue of state of democracy. And what it tells me is the voters going, look, I'm not here for one specific issue. I'm here because I'm worried about X. And there's a lot of what I'd call the existential threat voters who believe if the other party gets power, their way of life's in trouble. And first of all, it's interesting that this is basically cutting right down the middle. So that means you have a chunk of voters in both parties who view this election in existential terms. Maybe we've got to come up with a better punch here to offer people. But I understand why I think if you don't have a specific issue, you chose that. And that tells me, in some ways, this is a very macro election. People really believe the stakes are high in this election. And that's to me, that's what that tells me.
Let me pick up on one of these threads, too, because you talk about independents and moderates. You saw the vice president, the Harris campaign, really try to extend an olive branch to that particular group. I was on the campaign trail as she was bringing in former Congresswoman Republican Liz Cheney to try to turn out some of those folks who identify as more moderate. She's also worked to extend an olive branch to late deciders as well. And here's the exit polls. About 12% of voters say they made their decision on who to vote for in the last month. 86% made it before that. And you also have people who decided in just the last week to turn out as well. We're going to pull those numbers up in just a second, too. 7% in just the course of the last 7 days. And you've had some news made over the course of that last week.
It is. And, one of my theories of this election to watch for tonight has always been, are we going to see a 2016 effect? And what I mean by that is it's pretty clear now in hindsight that going into the election, there a lot of voters waited to the last second to make that decision. And they made the decision, and all of a sudden, all those late deciders went to him. So when they all move in the same direction, that usually tells you, it's usually that's the person that usually wins.
Okay, let's keep an eye on that. And as we do, I also want to keep an eye on some of those economic numbers as well, because as you saw, the economy, if it is not the top issue, and again, those numbers might shift, it might end up that way at the end of the night, it is certainly among the top issues for voters. So we're lucky to have our expert correspondent, Christine Romans, covering all things economy for us. And you are digging into these exit polls just like we are.
Yeah, and I'm also trying to keep an eye on the gender gap when you look at the economy and you look at what people are really worried about. And this is so fascinating. These are voters under 30 years old, right? Young voters who are energized in this election. And the top issue for men under 30 is the economy tied with state of democracy. For women, it is abortion. Far and away the #1 thing for women. And the younger the voters, as I look at these exit polls, the younger they are, abortion goes up the list for how important it is for them. So that's something to keep an eye on, the different ages and the gender gap there. Overall, the condition of the U.S. economy, though, I mean, you can see poor, not so good. You know, more than 7 out of 10 voters, more than that, think that things are not going in the right direction. That is in line with what we've been hearing in the opinion polls for months and months, Hallie.
Christine, one of the things that as I've been in some of these battleground states talking with voters about the economy, I hear a lot about the cost of living. I hear a lot about how expensive like a pound of burger meat is, or the price at the gas pump, for example, even with, of course, gas prices coming down, inflation coming down. But that is a question that we asked on these exit polls, Christine, and you're getting into that as well.
Yeah, and there's housing, and there's childcare, there's wages. Depending on where you are in the country, there are different sort of pain points in terms of how people are feeling. We asked, in the last year, has inflation caused your family a severe hardship, 21%, a moderate hardship, 53%. That is a huge proportion of the electorate that thinks that inflation has been a hardship. No hardship at all, a surprising only 24%. Some might say they can't believe it's that high, considering how many people have been complaining about inflation. And by the way, this is a question we didn't even have to ask 4 years ago. 4 years ago, we were asking about the pandemic. Now so it's a reminder. I want to show you this one really quickly. Family finances, worst today, 45%. That is the highest, worst family finances compared to 4 years ago in 5 presidential cycles. That's even a little bit higher than the great financial crisis, guys.
That's so interesting. Christine Romans, thank you very much. Appreciate that. You know, the campaigns, the candidates are looking at this data too. Peter Alexander and Dasha Burns are covering both the Harris and the Trump campaigns, as we're just getting our look now at favorability ratings for each of the candidates. I want to show you here. Donald Trump will start here. 54% of voters view him unfavorably, 44% favorably. But Dasha, as you well know, part of the strategy here for the Trump campaign is to take that 44% and make sure that they get to the polls, that they turn out and vote. It's about supercharging the people who already back him, Dasha.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And a large focus for that base is men. You heard Christine Romans there just talk about the gender gap. I, from being out in the field, would almost call it like a gender chasm, a gender Grand Canyon. It is so stark, this divide, and it could be the defining factor for this election. And you can see that in just the closing messages that we watched from those candidates. Former President Trump last night got the endorsement of the nation's most popular podcaster, Joe Rogan. That is likely to maybe help him with men, especially young men. He's hugely influential.
I'll say, okay, so for the
women, he did bring out
for the polls,
Megyn Kelly, who was actually
Jersey. Yeah, it says Jersey's at 8 o'clock, bro.
Approach with women, but she tried to help him make that
Jersey, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, and
Tennessee. He's really, Hallie, been leaning into talking points that are more catering to men and platforms that cater
at 9 o'clock,
to
Arizona, Colorado, Iowa, Kansas, Louisville, and Michigan.
He's already posting on Truth Social saying that there's a lot of talk about massive cheating in Philadelphia, saying law enforcement is coming. We got a response from D.A. Krasner saying that the only talk about massive cheating has come from one candidate, Donald J. Trump, and there
whatever they pulling
no
up. Is whatever they pulling up right now.
Whatsoever with law enforcement to support this wild allegation. We have seen him sowing seeds of doubt about this election with no evidence to support anything nefarious.
9 p.m.
An
ET,
important reality check there. Dasha Burns, live for us in South Florida. Thank you. Let's take a look now at the favorability for Vice President Harris, and you can see it here now. 50% of exit polled voters say that they have an unfavorable opinion of her versus 48% who say that they have a favorable opinion of her. In other words, that they like her, that they are into her, if you will. Let me bring in Peter Alexander, who's live for us just outside Howard University in Washington, where the vice president is holding her watch party. Peter, give us a sense of what you're hearing and seeing from the campaign at this moment.
Thank you.
Well, I can tell you what I'm hearing right now, and it's a lot of loud music as they get ready for a celebration here tonight. They are projecting confidence and hoping this night works out very well, but we'll save that for a little bit later.
Yeah,
to the favorability numbers right now, I think particularly
outside.
what is satisfying or is viewed as a good sign among Harris campaign officials with whom I'm speaking is the fact that Kamala Harris, the vice president's favorability, is at 48%. Joe Biden's is at 41%. She's well outperforming him right now. Of course, there have been real concerns that the sense that Americans thought the country was headed in the wrong direction. They had largely been dissatisfied with President Biden's handling of his time in office could have an impact on her. Ultimately, it's likely in part what led him to have to get out of this race. But she is not only outperforming President Biden, she's also outperforming former President Donald Trump at 44% right now. And what's also striking to me is in the NBC News poll, Hallie, as you know, that we put out only a matter of days ago, Americans had sort of a rosier view of Donald Trump's time in office now than they did at the time itself. 48% saying that they like the way he handled his time in office, which is notable because his favorability right now, according to these exit polls, early exit polls, is at 44%. So that number has come down a little bit as well. So those are some of the things we're going to keep close eyes on over the course of this evening. A couple other things.
Big night tonight. Big night tonight.
Advisors are flagging to reporters like myself, reaching out and speaking to them. They are seeing large numbers among young voters, particularly on college campuses. We were told specifically about Lehigh with a 7-hour line only a short time ago. They're sending more voting machines there, election officials are, and the campaign sending more support in the form of some of its surrogates to keep those folks in line in hopes that they'll come out in favor of Kamala Harris.
Yeah,
Hallie.
Pennsylvania is so critical to that campaign and to the former president's campaign as well. Peter Alexander, I hope you got your coffee handy. We'll be talking with you, I know, in just a little bit. We're also getting exit polls out of not just the national landscape here, but some of those key swing states. Remember, exit pollsters post up at some 600 locations all across the country. So let's get a look at some of the results here. And I want to start here with the blue wall. So remember, that's Pennsylvania, that's Michigan, that's Wisconsin. Favorability, unfavorability. Again, favorable. Both candidates here are below 50%. This largely tracks to a degree to what we saw nationally. Sunbelt, very similar story here, too. I want to get to the fact that polls are starting to close now. Looking at my watch in just about 45 minutes in some of those key battlegrounds. We're going to start on the East Coast. We're going to start with Georgia. And you can see Indiana, Kentucky, Vermont, Virginia, South Carolina.
I live in
as well.
Georgia. What's going on?
Georgia that we're going to be watching for, that you should be watching for as well. 30 minutes later, you've got North Carolina. This is one that is so fascinating here. Remember, former President Trump won this state twice, but it looks like it is, based on public polling, a very close race. And then at 8 o'clock, buckle up, because that's when it hits, right? Pennsylvania, the all-important battleground here, along with a slew of other states, including some with key Senate races, for example, like in Maryland. Ohio also has one. That'll be closed by 8 p.m. too. Polls close there at 7:30. We've got a lot to get to tonight, and we're going to continue our rolling coverage. We're going to take you live to 3 of these critical swing states in just a couple of minutes, checking in with our teams in Georgia, Michigan, and Wisconsin as our special coverage of Decision 2024 continues.
Decision 2024. Decisions, y'all. Jojo, get out of my room, please. Thank you. Nephews. What we gonna do with them, y'all? Oh, y'all, what a big day it is. I'll be right back.
closer to the Gaza border. A story of resilience and hope. Please take care of yourself and each other.
We are back now with our Decision 2024 election night coverage right here on NBC News. The country is still voting. Somebody you know may be out at the polls even now, but we are getting some data in from our exit polls here, like how voters feel about the way things are going in the country today. You see 72% of those polled say that they feel dissatisfied or angry. It's a negative view of where we are in America right now. 26% say they feel enthusiastic or satisfied. We've also been talking about what early exit polls, and again, these numbers could change throughout the course of the night and the course of the next couple of weeks as we get information in. But with the state of democracy as the top issue, 25% feel that it is secure, 73% feel that it is threatened. I want to bring in our political editor, Chuck Todd, to talk us through some of these numbers. Chuck, your takeaways.
Look, this is a macro election. This is not one that's being decided by a single issue. Voters coming in here, they're nervous. They're not happy with the way things are going. When you have 70+%, there's going to be both Harris and Trump voters in there.
That's right.
Right. I mean, so this is not about they're not happy with a specific party in Washington. This is bigger than that. This is about who's an American. So I do think that you see, this is why I think you've seen what feels like, people feeling not as good about how things are going about the country, but also uncertain. They're not even certain that either president is going to make them feel great. Yeah. They're just clearly nervous about what the other side might do. Look, the other takeaway I have here is the fact that I think the makeup of this electorate, fewer people identifying with either major party. Now, if you think about it, if you're dissatisfied with the way things are going, you're not happy with how if you think democracy is threatened, then it actually makes a lot of sense that you don't want to identify with either major party.
That's right. That you're not
Well,
down
I think that's a big deal. I think we're in a moment here. We've been in the middle of a realignment. This feels like we're in the middle of another one here. In fact, there are going to be more people identifying as independent, more people identifying as moderate that have ever voted
What they in here talking about, y'all?
2 times that Donald Trump is on the ballot. I think it's very significant, and I think it's a sign that this is a very fluid electorate, and I'd be very careful reading too much in it right now.
When I hear you say that, my takeaway is let's be careful then, thinking we know anything based on some of these.
It's pretty clear, right, that whoever wins independence is going to win this election, really? Because it's the only way you can win, because fewer, literally only fewer than 3 in 4 voters are picking one of the 2 major parties to identify with.
That's crazy.
Of course, we know this isn't a national election. This is going to be won or lost in the battleground states as we get on that road to 270. So I want to head to one of those states now, Wisconsin, and already a big headline coming out of there. The city of Milwaukee now says it will recount all of its absentee ballots. I want to bring in Shaquille Brewster, who's live for us.
All right, Milwaukee.
Shaq, explain this. Why is this?
Explain it, Shaq.
Yeah, Hallie, this is something that's not happening at polling locations, but instead happening downtown, where in Milwaukee they gather all of that early vote, people who voted early in person and those mail-in ballots, and they count them all at once, all in one location. And what they found is that the 13 high-speed tabulators there, while they were sealed, they weren't locked properly. So the clerk there went around, got the Republican observer, got the Democratic observer, and went through and relocked those tabulators. But
Biden won the 2020
abundance of
general
caution
election
and to eliminate
57%.
any doubt, and in order to be
2020
fully
Trump
transparent,
won Alabama
they went
62
through
to
and
36. Shit.
All right, Shaq's audio just went down. We're going to work to get that back up. As we do, I want to take you to another battleground state, and we'll get back to Shaq in a second, and that is the state of Georgia. Polls are going to close there in just about 40 minutes from now. Remember, this was a very close, razor-thin margin back in 2020 with former President Trump's loss, and became ground zero for alleged election interference. Again, no evidence to support that. We're asking voters there, how confident are you that this year's election is being conducted fairly and accurately? 17% say not confident, but a majority, by far, 81%
said confident
about the elections there. Blaine Alexander is live for us. You see her there. Blaine, give us a gut check on where things stand.
Well, where things stand is right now I'm standing in the Fulton County Elections Hub. You talked about polls closing here in Georgia in about 40 minutes. Once that happens, the activity here is going to start to pick up. Let me show you a little bit of what's happening over my shoulder. Right back there, those machines, that's where we are going to see the tabulations for the votes as they come in here to Fulton County, Georgia's most populous county. Of course, Hallie, you know it very well.
You got 37 minutes to a close, so it don't matter if you got 1 minute left. You can still vote, right?
Claims during 2020. I think what's interesting, Hallie, about this location, this building didn't exist back in 2020. This is something that was built new since the election last time. It's kind of a way to get all of the operations here under one roof, a way to streamline this process here in Fulton County. It's also a place that allows members of the public to come in and observe this process. We've already seen some people who are coming in to watch this tabulation from both parties, Republicans and Democrats, kind of here amongst the general population with us members of the media. So that's what's happening here. Now, just for a big picture of what's kind of happening around the state, you know about those record early voting numbers. More than 4 million people cast a ballot. That led to very short lines today. In fact, I've got to say that between me and my amazing producer, Charlie Guile, we went around to about 15 or so different polling locations throughout a couple of counties. Every single place we saw almost no line. I talked to some people. They told me most of them said that their wait was as short as about 5 minutes or so. Some people in the 15-minute range earlier in the morning. But that really kind of gives you a sense that early voting and those absentee ballots, those are the results that are going to have to be tabulated starting around 8 o'clock, because that's an hour after polls close. That's state law. So because the bulk of those votes were cast early, that's where we're going to start to see a lot of those results come in relatively quickly, Hallie.
As you're talking with voters who have been in line, Blaine, as you've been out there living and working in Georgia, of course, over the course of not just today, but over the course of the last couple of weeks, what stands out to you?
I think a couple of things. One, I think the increased focus on Metro Atlanta, I should say, Metro Atlanta for both candidates is very different from what we saw in the closing days of 2020. Back in 2020, Donald Trump was going to the reliably red counties, kind of on the southern part, the northern part of the state. This time, everybody has been focused for the most part on Fulton County, or rather on the Metro Atlanta area. That really is where both of them are relying on the vote share to come in and take them across the finish line, Hallie.
Blaine Alexander live for us there in Battleground, Georgia. Blaine, thank you. Let me take you back to Milwaukee now, where, Shaq, I think we fixed your microphone, right? So finish your sentence, please, on the latest of what's happening there.
Yes. Yes, bottom line, downtown, those ballots are going to be recounted. Nothing nefarious happening, but because of an agreement between Republicans and Democrats, they just want to make sure that there's some transparency there. So they're recounting those ballots. That might mean a later night here in Milwaukee. But outside of that, everything has been going smooth. I want you to take a look inside this polling location. I'll tell you, here at this location, the clerk says that the line this morning stretched out of the door, that it went an hour long or so. And they actually have a small college in the area. So they said that they've been having a lot of people take advantage of Wisconsin's same-day registration and go into that table that you were just looking at and actually register in person on this election day. I'll tell you, my favorite story, Hallie, is that someone said he was undecided up to the moment that he walked up to this polling location, which is essentially a field house here in Milwaukee in a park. He said he didn't know who he was going to decide on, so he took 2 laps around the park, hit a long walk, and finally decided he would be backing, in this case, Vice President Kamala Harris. But you mentioned Milwaukee is a place that we're going to be watching incredibly closely. It's one that has been the focus for Democrats. Saw a lot of big visits ahead of Election Day. It's one that is very important to them. So we're going to be watching these results very closely. Unfortunately, those results might take a little bit longer to come and to be produced because of that little snafu downtown.
Shaq Brewster talking with who may be the latest late decider in the polling place where you are now. Shaq, thank you very much. Appreciate that. We are just about now 35 minutes away from polls closing in Battleground, Georgia. Not too long from now, you can see the other states where polls close at 7 p.m. Georgia is the one to watch. You've also got 7:30 poll closings in North Carolina. Ohio is interesting as well. There's a key Senate race there, and you can see the swing states that you need to be circling on your map at home, and I'm sure you have one, as our special coverage here of Decision 2024 continues tonight. Savannah Guthrie and Lester Holt will pick up right after a break.
Let's go.
At 2 a.m. Eastern.
If you didn't vote, vote. If you don't want to, it's all good.
I'll be there too with exit poll data.
It's all
Chuck
good.
Todd, Kristen Welker, and Tom Yamas. See you in a minute.
See you in a minute. Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. How do y'all feel about this, man? How do y'all feel about what's going on, man? How do y'all feel about what's going on? Are y'all excited? Is it rigged? Y'all let me know, is it rigged? Are y'all excited? Is it rigged? Y'all let me know, is it rigged? I think it's pretty fair. But who cares? I don't even know. Playing truth or dare. Let's go, man. I'm excited. I feel like the Super Bowl right now, man. Whoever wins, I'm pretty sure they deserve it. A lot of people will kill me for that. They playing some good music. Man, oh man, oh man. What a day to be alive. What a day to be alive. What a day to be alive, y'all. As we wait for this 1 minute to do its thing. And we get back to these polls. I'm pretty sure we got like 20 something minutes till we are back in this MF. We got 20 minutes till the votes are in for certain states, and we get to go from there. You dig. I literally switched up my channel to politics because of this upcoming race, man. Today. Nothing specific. It's just, I don't know, man.
Top story live from Paris, live in Tel Aviv. We are here in Butler, Pennsylvania. Every week.
Believe it or not, y'all, it's very important for who's the next president. Whether you're going for, whether you're a Democrat or you're a Republican, it's very important who wins this for a lot of reasons. So, let y'all know.
Good evening from our NBC News Decision 2024 election headquarters.
It may be the closest election this country has ever seen, and we are going to cover every moment of it.
Our live coverage of election night begins right now.
Uh-oh, y'all. And tonight, here we go.
It comes down to this. One of the wildest elections ever finally reaches its end.
Will Vice President Kamala Harris make history as the first female president?
It is time to turn
I forgot that's the thing. History?
On the drama and the conflict.
Or will it be a historic comeback for former President Trump?
This will be America's new golden age.
An election rocked by upheaval.
It's been the honor of my life to serve as your president.
And violence. Now in the hands of some 150 million Americans.
Everybody said that shit was staged. What y'all think?
To have their voices heard.
Our correspondents live at campaign headquarters and with real-time updates from across the battleground states. Our decision desk ready to call the races.
Yo, somebody get this fly out my damn room. Holy crap.
We have brand new exit polls just in, with the first poll closings of the night just a half hour away.
Who will control?
Come on, Georgia.
Who will be the next president of the United States?
I think Georgia's up first. That's exactly where I live at. So we need to do what it do.
From NBC News, Decision 2024, live from Democracy Plaza at Rockefeller Center. Here now, Lester Holt and Savannah Guthrie.
Good evening and welcome to our live coverage of Election Night 2024.
Hi, everybody. Good to have you along with us. Never before in
let's go.
history have we entered an election night with the polls so close And Lester, with so much uncertainty.
Yeah, the campaign for president has really been a 2-year-long roller coaster ride. Some have found it exciting, most, however, anxiety-inducing. But it's ending, as it always
It's game time, baby.
You can see here the long lines across the country as Americans carry out their civic duty.
After all the speeches, the debates, the $1 billion in TV ads, have you seen some of those? The first polls are finally set to close in less than a half hour, and we'll begin to answer the question of who will be the 47th president of the United States.
Today, Kamala Harris was working the phones, talking to voters, and Donald Trump cast his ballot in Florida along with his wife, Melania.
A reminder of what will be decided tonight. It's not just the presidency on the line, but control of the Senate and the House of Representatives as well. And of course, nobody knows which way any of this will go. As we look at Democracy Plaza outside Rockefeller Center here in the heart of New York, we see the key number tonight. You'll see it a lot. 270. That is the number of electoral college votes a candidate needs
Here we go.
to win the White House. And as it has been for the candidates
Every 4 years.
much of our focus tonight will be right here in the 7 battleground states that are most likely to decide this election.
Our correspondents are spread out across all of them and at campaign headquarters, but we're
Please
going to
get the
begin
fly in
right
my
here in
room.
the studio
Jesus.
as we stand by for the vote count. We're hearing directly from voters in a new round of exit polls, and Tom Yamas has the latest on that. Tom, good evening.
Lester and Savannah, great to be with you tonight. So we asked voters as they voted, right after they left, who they wanted to vote for and how they voted. This is called the exit polls. There's about 600 of them across the country in the 7 battleground states, plus Texas, Florida, and Ohio. So here is our preliminary data. And again, this could change. We want to tell you that. So when we asked voters the most important issue, 34%, the top issue was state of democracy. Right under that, the economy at 31%, abortion, 14%, immigration, 11%. Remember, that's how former President Trump decided to close out his campaign, and 4% for policy. As we move on here, we ask who do you trust more to handle the economy. 47% for the vice president, 51% for Trump. Remember, former president ran on that as well, trying to close on that. We also asked, who do you trust more to handle?
Duh, it has to.
Vice
Yo,
President Harris chose to close out her campaign on this message as well. 51%.
I can't believe 40. I can't believe 44. It should be 100% Harris. I'm sorry.
Well, these are early exit polls, and we should mention that we don't have full information, and people are still voting. But let's go back to this most important issue. I think some eyebrows were raised when state of democracy becomes the top issue. Some people think, oh, does that favor the Democrats? Is that January 6th, that kind of thing? It means different things to different people.
Yeah, and we're going to be completely transparent tonight. It was surprising to us as well, because you think maybe the top issue would have been the economy, abortion.
Not for real. I thought it was going to be the economy.
Democracy. But we have to understand here, we can't dig too deep into the data just yet because people are still voting. We'll have more that we can break down in the hours ahead. But state of democracy, essentially, that was the question. So who doesn't like democracy? All Americans like democracy. So whether you love Trump or you love Vice President Kamala Harris, that might be your top issue. It doesn't tell us a whole lot, but what it does tell us is that the electorate is motivated, and they came out to vote today.
Yeah, it may mean what's the state of the country and how important do you think this election is? And many, many people feel there are very high stakes, Lester. Let's get right to it. Peter Alexander at the Harris headquarters in Washington, D.C., campaign officials telling him they're feeling confident about the young voter turnout so far. What are you hearing, Peter?
Harris HQ.
Yeah, that's exactly right. As we wait for Kamala Harris to arrive here a little bit later this evening, this is her alma mater at Howard University. The early indications, at least in the eyes of the Harris campaign, are good ones, specifically as it relates to the turnout.
Yeah, make sure y'all pay attention to y'all state down below, wherever y'all live at. 9 p.m. Minnesota, Nebraska, New Mexico, Texas, Wisconsin, Wyoming, and more. I didn't see the other ones, but
the campus of Lehigh University.
in 2 hours.
At times today, the line was up to 7 hours long. The campaign saying it's sending additional support. That support.
I'm in Georgia. We got like 17 minutes left. At 10 o'clock, Montana, Nevada, Utah.
Film series. Don Cheadle, Paul Rudd, Mark Ruffalo.
20 minutes.
Sources tell me will be arriving there.
I'm in 3 hours for that, but we got 20 minutes in Georgia.
Energized to keep them in line. We're also told that state election officials are sending additional polling stations there so they can try to
Arizona
get
exit poll, abortion should be 67% illegal, 30% illegal.
Right now,
Nice.
Savannah and Lester. The numbers, according to early exit polls, show
Nice,
that Kamala
Arizona.
Harris is at 40% 48% in terms of favorability. Compare that
Arizona
to 44%
poll, President
for former
Biden
President Trump. But notably,
approval,
Joe
57
Biden,
disapprove,
the current president,
30,
is at 41%. That means that Kamala Harris is outperforming the man along whom she ran in 2020, with whom she served for the last 4 years. There had been some real concerns that could have been an albatross for her, given so many Americans had indicated they thought the country was going in the wrong direction. Things we'll be watching over the course of this evening.
All right, Peter Alexander, thank you. And Garrett Haake is at Trump headquarters in West Palm Beach, Florida. Garrett, the former president has been posting on social media today.
Get off social media.
Talking about widespread cheating. What is he saying?
That's right, Lester, and his posts running contrary to the campaign's spin, their official statements at the moment right now. Listen, they came here tonight expecting to throw a party. I'm on the floor of the Palm Beach Convention Center, an absolutely massive ballroom that they have booked out, ready to throw a huge victory party, something that didn't really happen in 2016, a race
that's going to happen, buddy.
Even Donald Trump, and of course didn't happen in 2020 when they lost. I just got off the phone with a senior Trump campaign advisor who told me they are cautiously confident in what they've been seeing across the battleground states so far today, and that the former president is trying to run through the tape, making calls to radio stations in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, urging his supporters to go vote, stay in line if they're already there, and trying to focus on an economic message, something that they've always felt is better for
Indiana
electoral,
I can't even say that goddamn thing. Votes 58% Trump, 48, 35% to 33% in Kentucky. Shit.
Any particular evidence that we can find about massive cheating in his
Hello, talk about massive cheating in Philadelphia. Law enforcement coming. What?
Turnout is expected to be very high, and ironically, places, at least in the case of Detroit, where he actually performed better in
Georgia, Indiana, Kentucky, South Carolina, Vermont, and Virginia. Polls open at 7 o'clock. I mean, closing. Sorry, closing at 7 o'clock.
Especially in its closing days, that he believes the only way he could lose is if there is some kind of cheating.
Here we go again with this cheating shit. What if he loses?
Jesus, bro.
Okay, Garrett, thank you. We're going to go to Battleground, Pennsylvania now. NBC's Jacob Soboroff is in Philadelphia, where they've actually added 2 extra voting machines at one polling station because of the huge crowds. Jacob.
Yeah, Lester, good evening to you. That's absolutely right. We have been here all day long. We've been watching the line at Temple University. As a matter of fact, it used to stretch all the way down to the next avenue over here. Now the line, which was about 2.5 hours long, is quickly moving inside ahead of the 8 o'clock poll closing time here at Temple University. This is one of 1,703 different election divisions all across the city of Philadelphia. That's the same jurisdiction as the county of Philadelphia, 700 polling places. About 500,000 people were expected to vote in person today. Some of those students who had been waiting 2.5 hours are quickly inside right now. As you can see, they're coming out at a pace that we haven't seen all day after they added those 2 machines you referenced.
He's just standing in the middle of everybody.
A positive sign for the Harris campaign, but of course, until all the ballots are cast and counted, we won't know that for sure, Lester.
All right, Jacob, thanks.
All right, well, we're right over here at the big board, 270. We mentioned it is the magic number tonight. That is what it will take to win the White House. Each campaign says they have multiple paths to get to that magic number. So let's get back to Tom Yamas at the big board, because this is the big picture. Yeah. Here's the map. The gray areas are the battleground states, and there are various ways to get to that magic number of 270.
Yeah, and this is how we ended up at the end of election week in 2020. As you mentioned, those battleground states, we haven't colored them in yet. Biden, he won 6 of those 7 battleground states. So the easiest path for the vice president is to hold the blue wall. Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. If she does that, Savannah, she gets to 270, she's going to the White House. But if she's having a terrible night tonight and there's an emergency, she doesn't win Wisconsin, Michigan, or Pennsylvania, the blue wall collapses, she has an emergency route through the Sun Belt. If she can win Nevada, win Arizona, remember, Biden won those, keep Georgia, and flip North Carolina, she gets to 275. But if this is the path for the Democrats, they're going to have a few heart attacks.
Well, I was going to say that's a much tougher path, and polls.
That's a tough path.
Let's talk about
that's a tough path, man.
Okay, just think about the east side. This is the easiest way to understand Trump's path. If he flips Georgia back to red, holds North Carolina, and then turns Pennsylvania red, he's going to the White House again. But if he can't win Pennsylvania, he has to win somewhere else in the Midwest. Donald Trump tonight cannot get to the White House unless he makes a crack in the blue wall. If he wins Michigan, he holds North Carolina, he flips Georgia. He can do it with just Nevada and those 6 electoral votes. But if he can't win Michigan and the blue wall comes down to Wisconsin, he has to win down in Arizona to get those 11 electoral votes.
And that's what we're going to be doing
Yo,
tonight.
this fly is
electoral
fucking
votes.
killing
Maybe
me.
tomorrow.
Maybe
the
tomorrow,
days ahead.
maybe next
Yeah.
week. We shall see. Lester, let's go over to you.
You two are terribly optimistic. Thank you. Let's bring in Kristen Welker now, moderator of Meet the Press. And Kristen, what are you looking for tonight? Some early indications that suggest one or more of those paths we just talked about are real.
Absolutely, Lester. I'm looking for a couple of things. First of all, let's talk about the historic gender gap that could be one of the big stories of this election. We've seen it in polling leading up to tonight. Vice President Kamala Harris has a significant lead with women voters. Former President Donald Trump has a real lead with male voters. So we'll be watching those early returns to see how that bears out, to see how the split actually falls. Abortion on the ballot in 10 different states. So that will be notable, could potentially drive up turnout. Early bellwethers, Lester. Virginia in particular, there's a key race for Congress there. Virginia 7, Eugene Vindman running against Derek Anderson. This was a Democratic-held seat. Do Democrats continue to hold on to this seat, or do they lose it to Republicans? If they lose to Republicans, that could spell trouble for Democrats early on in the evening. And then this is a really fascinating one, Lester. Split ticket voters. In 1988, you had 17 states that voted opposite parties for president and Senate. In 2020, down to one state, Maine.
Wow.
What do we see tonight? It's really been dwindling over the years.
All right. Thank you, Kristen. Let's go over to Savannah now.
Poll closings are about to start in 7 o'clock Eastern time, including in the battleground of Georgia. And if you've ever wondered how we're able to call some of these races so quickly, stay put. We're going to take you inside. We'll show you how we do it right after the break.
Who else stays in Georgia? Let me know down in the comment section, man. Big night, man. Big night. For the next 4 years, who do we have to deal with for the next 4 years? Let's find out in the next 4 minutes. Next 4 years, who do you got to deal with, man? Who y'all think is going to win? Who do y'all think is going to win, man? I know y'all see me looking right a lot, but I have 2 monitors right now, so I got stuff going on in this monitor while I got the race up. You know what I'm saying? Wasn't sure if I wanted to go live today. I might as well, shit. They be playing these bangers. They be playing these bangers. Big decision tonight, man. Hopefully everybody voted. If y'all didn't, it's okay. I understand. But it's very important for y'all to vote, man. Very important. Very important, y'all. Four years, huh? They said it's a close one. We shall see, bro. I'm nervous for Georgia. There's a couple more states at 7 o'clock. Georgia is my main one right now because I live in Georgia. So we finna see where y'all thoughts is at in this damn state. You know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? I be wondering, y'all, like, when y'all put in y'all votes, when people put in their votes, like, what do they... Are they just going off with social media and without getting any, you know what I'm saying, without gathering information themselves? Are they just, you know what I'm saying? Are they grabbing information from both parties and like combining them together and like putting them up against each other and see what makes more sense for them and the economy and their loved ones and stuff. I wonder if they go about it like that, because that's the only way to go about it. I'm not gonna lie. Me being young, I'm glad I started reacting to stuff like this, because shit, first of all, this generation is clueless as hell. But as far as me being young, we always been clueless on what the hell be going down in politics. So I always wanted to know how politics works. So that's exactly why I'm here right now. Shit. I'm not a politic geek, but I try my best to learn whatever I can learn, especially from y'all. So I appreciate y'all, man. I appreciate y'all. Yeah. And thanks to y'all, this is my job. This is my full-time job, y'all. Literally. Miss Cindy, I just got back from voting. Now it's time to pray. May God be with us. We're gonna pray, Miss Cindy. I'm not gonna ask who you voted for, but I can kind of take a guess. And yeah, we're gonna pray, man. We're gonna pray and see what happens. Trump said there's already people cheating, so I don't know what that means, but we're here. If you're not subscribed, subscribe to the channel, y'all. We post every single day. We don't go live every day, but we do post every day on the channel.
As they roll in on this historic night. One place that's speeding up its vote count system is battleground Michigan, with 15 electoral votes up for grabs. Jesse Kirsch is in Detroit, where people are still registering to vote. Jesse.
That's right, Lester. Our colleague Julia Jester tells us in downtown Detroit there are still people lining up to register to vote or to deal with a registration issue like a change of address. So people continue to be going through that process. We are outside of a polling location right now, which will still be open for a little bit more than an hour. Of course, if people are in line by 8 p.m. Eastern time, the expectation is they will still be able to cast their ballot. Once we have all of the votes in, we should be getting the results potentially faster compared to 2020, as you alluded to. The Secretary of State says that we could have unofficial full results here in Michigan by around noon tomorrow. This time
noon tomorrow.
Election, this is the first one where in Michigan municipalities can pre-process
What do you mean?
absentee ballots. They're not releasing those results, but they can get those votes ready to be tabulated and be announced to the public. And in Detroit, obviously a massive city in this state, we are told by the Secretary of State that 95% of the absentee votes have been pre-processed already. And so that will potentially accelerate the timeline compared to 2020, where there was a vacuum of time that led to issues and misinformation and a lot of concern. And so that's something that we're going to be watching for, how that plays out. I got off the phone a short time ago with Congresswoman Haley Stevens from the Detroit area. She tells me, she's a Democrat, she tells me that if we see over 50% turnout in Detroit, that will be something that gives Democrats reason to smile. But there are multiple shifts potentially in the electorate we're watching for in this state. The war in Gaza, the situation in the Middle East, something that the substantial Arab American community in this state will be paying close attention to. We have a third-party candidate, Jill Stein, who has made a concerted effort to appeal to that community.
9 more minutes, y'all.
Several things we'll be watching
Poll
for tonight. Savannah,
is closing. We shall see what's going on.
Until Wednesday afternoon in 2020 to get Michigan's results. We'll see if they improve on that record. In about 10 minutes, the first polls will close, and our decision desk here at NBC will make the first projections of the night. We've got Tom Yamas
There
here
we go,
to
man.
pull back the curtain. I think a lot of people wonder, how do they do this, and how careful are we? And you're going to give us a sneak peek.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, right? Because all through the night, you'll hear us projecting states, sometimes within minutes of polls closing, other times, as Savannah mentioned, days later. So tonight, we wanted to give you an inside look to show you how our team makes those calls.
Tonight, election officials across the country on a mission to count millions of ballots. They then report out their tallies, where our decision desk pulls them in and gets to work. John Lipinski runs the decision desk.
We have zero tolerance for errors.
His job, project the winner in each race, often before all the votes are counted.
Election night 2020.
Calls like this one in 2020 came just seconds after the polls closed at 7 p.m.
The president will easily carry Indiana.
So when viewers tuned in 4 years ago, they saw we called Indiana with only 7% of the vote in. How's that possible?
We leverage exit poll data and actual real vote returns.
That exit poll data comes from workers spread out across the country asking in-person and mail-in voters who they voted for. But that real-time vote count is also put through advanced computer models, which are then analyzed by data experts and political scientists at the decision desk.
The only thing we care about is getting it right.
The main factors: how big is the difference between the two candidates, and how much vote has yet to be counted. Think of it like a basketball game. If a team is up by 20 points at halftime, they're favored to win, but there's still a good chance the trailing team can catch up in the next half. But if a team is up by 20 points with only 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter, there's just not enough time to close the gap. That's how it is with the outstanding vote count.
We're trying to figure out, are there enough votes for the second place candidate to overtake the first place candidate? And sometimes it's mathematically impossible.
Lipinski and his team will also know where that outstanding vote is coming from. Is it from a very blue area or a red area, which adds to their formula? And if a race is really close, that could take days.
You really need all of the vote in to be able to make a call, to be able to sort of be absolutely certain of who the winner will be.
And the mantra of our decision desk is that they want to be right. They do not want to be first. And Savannah and Lester have had a lot of time to spend with the decision desk, getting me ready for the big board and for tonight's election night. I can tell you, they take their job so seriously. They're mathematicians, they're scientists, they're journalists. Thank God they do the math. We don't have to do it. And they are getting so much information from around the country. Sometimes the information is changing within the second. It's incredible. But again, they want to make sure they're right before they give that information to us.
By the way, they're siloed off. They're not even here in New York. They're in Philadelphia. So they are doing their work, and they tell us when they're ready to make a call, not the other way around.
We are about to see some of their work in action. We're coming up, and the first poll is about to close. Our decision desk is standing by to make its first projections of the evening as we begin to answer the question, who will be the next president of the United States? Stay with us for our live election night coverage on NBC.
Got about 5 minutes left, y'all. And we get to see a couple states, including Georgia, where I live, on who's about to become president. Basically, we try to make a prediction after that, based off states. It's been an exhausting year leading up to this point, y'all. Where everything that's been going on social media and stuff like that becomes a Trump and what's her name, but Harris. But we're here now. We shall see. We shall see. The longest commercial of my life, and they're usually 5 minutes. Jesus Christ.
More Americans turn to NBC News than any other news organization.
All right, we're back at 6:55 in the East. We are just minutes away from the first poll closings of the night.
And that also means we are minutes away from our first calls of the night, including one of the biggest battlegrounds of all. At the top of the hour, the first polls close. Our decision desk able to make its first calls of the night.
6 states and 60 delegates up for grabs, including one of the biggest battleground prizes in the South, Georgia.
The polls showing a race down to the wire. The state key to former President Trump's strategy for victory.
We are going to win the state of Georgia.
And if Vice President Harris wins it,
The path to the White House runs right through this state.
she opens up another path to the 270 electoral college votes needed to take the White House.
We are standing by for the first vote count and new exit
Yes,
poll
sir.
information from this critical battleground.
Let's go, Georgia.
The decision desk gets ready to make the first calls on the road to 270. So let's get to it. Who's ready to count some votes? Blaine Alexander is in Union City, Georgia for us tonight.
Here
It's just about
we
to close in
go.
that battleground. Hi, Blaine. What are you seeing?
Well, Savannah, really, this
So
is
2 minutes
the
left,
nerve
bet.
center for
2
Fulton
minutes left.
County elections. This is the elections hub. I can give you a quick look inside right over my shoulder. This is where we're going to see the tabulations. And I spoke with a top county official who tells me how this process will unfold through the night. Basically, what happens when the polls close here in Georgia, about 3 minutes from right now, poll managers are going to take the memory cards and they're going to take the paper ballots. They're then going to drive them to one of 7 check-in centers that spread throughout the county. And then all of that information, all of those things are going to come right here. It's going to be an interesting thing. We're going to see each one of those precinct managers walk in escorted by a law enforcement officer to bring those memory cards and the paper ballots, and that's when the tabulation process will begin.
Respect,
Now, of course,
respect.
the big question is how long is it going to take? Well, we know that Georgia law now requires them to start being uploaded, the early voting ballots and the absentee ballots to be uploaded within an hour of polls closing. So around 8 o'clock, we're going to start to see those results. They'll be shown on a big screen that's not too far away from where I'm standing. And certainly all of this is going to start to come alive once the polls close in about 2 minutes, Savannah.
All right, Blaine, thank you very much.
Now to our panel. Hallie Jackson is our senior Washington correspondent. Kristen Welker is host and moderator of Meet the Press. Hallie, let me start with you. We're about to get our first
Here we go.
First characterization.
Finally.
What are you thinking?
Listen, Georgia is going to be a critical state here. This is a place that had a very, very close razor-thin margin back in 2020. So what happens in Georgia is going to matter. A couple of things that I'm watching as I'm digging into those exit polls, which we'll get to after the polls close. Independents, who's doing well there. Non-white voters, black and Latino voters, especially when you're looking at places like Metro Atlanta. We're always looking at young voters, and we are always looking
Definitely
at the
Atlanta.
gender gap, of course. We know that that
Atlanta
is
the headline of the night.
Yeah, exactly.
Atlanta, so
And
many
we'll
black
see if
people
it
in
continues
Atlanta.
to be. I think a real tell for that is going to be after 8 o'clock when polls close, and we can start to report out more.
Georgia was one of those traditionally red states that Democrats had thought about and dreamed about for many years, and not until 2020 did they finally get it. It was the swingiest state
Yeah, I heard
the
that.
2020 election. Trump won it by 200,000, I think, in 2016, and then Biden barely eked by. So what do you expect tonight?
20,000?
Well, I think there has been so much focus on African-American voters.
I think it'll be mixed
black
up.
men in particular. I think about former President Barack Obama, who was out on the campaign trail with that very blunt message. for black male
My
voters.
thing
Don't
is,
sit on the
they
sidelines,
talking
get
about
out
black
and
voters,
vote.
but
So
is
we'll
it
see
black
in
voters
places like
vote for
Georgia,
Trump too?
Atlanta,
So what's your
suburbs,
point
that
in that conversation?
All right, we are having an election alert.
I know
now.
so many
We
black people that voted
approach
for
the
Trump. I'm
top
not.
of the hour and
Hey,
things
I'm not coming
are
from him. I'm
about to
just
start
saying,
getting
like,
interesting.
you can't just automatically think they vote for Harris. I voted for Harris. I'm not gonna lie to y'all. That's the first time I ever said that. But black people vote Republican too.
All right, 7
not forget
o'clock
about
in
that.
the East, and we will not waste any time. This is the moment where we move from those
Okay,
months
let's
of
go.
calculations to actual results.
That's right. The polls have just closed in 6 states, and NBC News is ready to make our first projections of the night. Here we go. We start with the state of Kentucky. NBC News projects that Donald Trump will win in Kentucky tonight. Let's move to
Jesus
Vermont.
Christ.
NBC News projects that Vermont will go in the Kamala Harris
Nice.
column this evening. This is where it brings us on the road to 270 right now. The early start, Donald Trump out in front with 8 electoral votes, 3 for Harris. A long way to go to get that 270, but that's where we are right now.
Well, polls closed in a handful of states, and these are the ones we haven't called yet: Indiana, South Carolina, Virginia, and that all-important state of Georgia. And here's how we're projecting it right now. Too early to call. It may come tonight, but
What?
it's not coming this exact moment.
Come
So
on.
continue to watch. We don't have any results yet to show you out of Georgia. It is simply too early to call, but Georgia is one of the faster states to count. So as I go over to Tom Yamos, who's starting to pull up the big board there and looking into some of the states that we're looking at. See, you've got Kentucky up on your map. Why is that?
This is the earliest. This is the earliest data we're having so far.
Nice.
We have called Kentucky for former President Trump. So
70%.
I'm trying to lay of the land to see, how is it looking compared to 2020? Again, a lot of that vote is still out, but we were able to make the projection as we explained to you. I also want to talk about Indiana because we're getting some vote data here. Still too early to call. Remember, only 14% of that vote is in right now. We also have this great feature on our board where we can show you where the remaining vote is. So obviously, the bigger the bubble is around those counties, that's how many votes are still outstanding. So here in the Indianapolis region, still a ton of votes waiting there. This is a state that Republicans have really done very, very well in elections past. If you go back here, Trump in 2020 won by about 16 points. Before that, it was even higher against Hillary Clinton. This is a state that Republicans are going to be safely in the win column, most likely. One of the places we can start to get data from is Hamilton County, with 60% of the vote in. This is not a great sign for Trump right now, but again, I want to be very clear. It's only 60% of the vote in, and this is what I'm talking about. 52% is what he won in 2020. She's on top right now with about 50% of the vote. There's about 1,300 vote difference right now. Again, still very early, but this is the first data we're getting tonight, so we're kind of parsing what we can so far. There are big areas like South Bend, Pete Buttigieg, who was the mayor there, obviously, where Notre Dame is as well, and the big city of Indianapolis, Evansville, there's a university down there. If we look at the map in 2020, these are mostly rural counties, red counties where Trump can really run up the vote. But again, in some of these smaller counties, he wants to be 60-70% to make sure he can overcome what she's going to get in Indianapolis. But still very early tonight, Savannah. We're going to get a lot of data as it's coming in, hot and heavy throughout the night. But right now, still very, very early.
This is when we get the tea leaves out. This is the tea leaves portion of the night. And, you have a red state. You know that Indiana's that Trump will prevail most likely. Same thing with Kentucky. But sometimes we can look into those counties and particularly the suburbs, because that is where we're starting to see a trend. Did
you go to Kentucky, it is red over there.
Because I'm looking at Hamilton County and I'm going, okay, people at home are probably going, wait a second, Hamilton County, was I supposed to know about that one? Was that one of the big ones? Here's why it's so interesting. It's because of the tea leaves, Savannah, and because of the trend lines as well, right? This is a county where Republican margins have been shrinking over time. Democrats have been making inroads. It is a suburban county. It is something similar that we see in places like Georgia, right? In some of these places in Pennsylvania and elsewhere. And that is what's so interesting about Hamilton. Let's not over-index on it. It's early, so that's why we're interested in it, because it's at least some data that's coming into us. But that's part of the story here.
You can see the importance of some of these places by how many times the candidates have visited. Donald Trump, 8 trips to Georgia, 7 for Kamala Harris. I mean, we cover it every night, them in this state and that state, but when you see it laid out, it's quite amazing.
It really is. And when you think about the state of Georgia, we'll be looking at those Atlanta suburbs. What types of margins do we see there? That's how President Biden wound up eking out a victory. And then the exurbs. That's where Donald Trump does well. Forsyth, Cherokee. Can he run up the margins there? If he's going to win the state of Georgia, he'll do it in those territories.
Let's take it a step out, because these are themes that will run throughout the night. Kamala Harris has to get the turnout up in the cities. She has to get her margins even higher in the suburbs, and why she has to make up for the rural vote that is expected for Donald Trump. And he has been very good in past elections at finding these voters who aren't traditional voters who come and vote for the first time.
Absolutely. That's where the ground game is so significant. And tonight will be, to some extent, a test not only of their campaigns, but of the ground games. Was the Trump campaign able to get out some of those voters who don't typically go out and vote? One note about Pennsylvania, one of the biggest states we're going to be watching throughout the course of the night. Joe Biden won it, not just by running up the margin in the Philadelphia county, but in the suburbs of Philadelphia, those collar counties that make all the difference. Hallie and I are both from Pennsylvania.
That's our Bucks County in the House, folks.
Yeah, what do the exit polls tell you?
Okay, so let me disengage myself from the chair here, because we can start to get into some of the vote breaks here in Georgia. And here's what's really interesting. We've talked about people who identify as independents. This is a category, right, of voter that Vice President Harris really extended an olive branch to. She wanted to win them over. But look at this. Based on our exit poll data, it is Donald Trump winning independents, nearly a double-digit margin over Vice President Harris in the state of Georgia. Here's your grain of salt caveat. These are early numbers. They may shift a little bit throughout the night, but this is really interesting here. And if you're wondering, well, how does this compare to 2020? Let me pull that up here, because he is overperforming. Donald Trump is overperforming his numbers with independent voters in Georgia this cycle than he did last cycle by a significant margin, by about 10 points as well. The other piece of this, too, let's look at the gender gap in Georgia. The gender gap, it exists here, folks. We are seeing, and we'll pull up this board in a second here, Kamala Harris winning with women, Donald Trump winning with men. And I'll tell you, as I walk back over to the table here, that is something else we'll be watching here throughout the night. She's got to do really well with women. He wants to do really well with men. And in my conversations with campaign sources just in the last couple of hours, they're looking at that as well.
We've called this election perhaps the battle of the sexes election, so we'll see how that plays out. I think we've got a winner to announce, key projection in the state of Indiana. And no surprise here, Donald Trump will win that state again. Here's the data that's just coming in. See if we can get some numbers. And you now know, because we've taken you inside the decision desk, how is it that we can project this with just 15% of the vote counted? It is because we are confident that the margin is sufficient to make that call. So let's go to the 270 map. We're going to see this a lot, and we start to fill in some of the gray. Indiana, red for Donald Trump. Let me go right over to Tom Yamas, who's actually looking at Florida. So Florida had a poll close. Or is it about to poll close?
Yeah, they've closed. We have some voting data.
Okay.
And we have an Osceola
Florida
County to show this why this is important. So here in Florida, we have the I-4 corridor, right? And this is kind of the central part of the state. It cuts right through here. When you think about Florida, you can think about it in three parts. The Panhandle, it's very red. That's Trump country in a lot of those counties. South Florida, usually reliably Democratic, but Republicans have made some inroads. And it's this I-4 corridor that is really the swing region. It's also the area where you find a large number of Puerto Rican voters as well. So when we come into Osceola, I wanted to highlight this because we have 71% of the vote in. This is usually a reliably blue county for Democrats. Again, not all of the vote is in. It is still early, but you can see Harris is underperforming in what is historically a blue county for Democrats. 56 for Joe Biden in 2020, 51 for Harris right now with 71% of the vote in. Again, it's still very early. So how is Trump doing? Well, in a county that he usually does very well in, Volusia County on the East Coast here, 56% in 2020 with 70% of the vote in. He's now at 59%. So he's overperforming. Again,
stop
still a lot of vote
overperforming.
out. Still a lot to do here and kind of see where the vote is going. But those are good signs for the president. Listen, Florida has been trending red. Trump won it in 2016. He won it in 2020. Actually, in 2016, when that political earthquake happened, it really happened once we started calling Florida. 30 electoral votes. The map gets very, very hard for Trump if he doesn't win Florida. Without Florida, his sort of strategy in the blue wall and everywhere else kind of collapses. He needed this in the win column. Still very early. Right now, statewide, only 18% of the vote is in. We can find out where that remaining vote is tonight. So you can see in the major cities, Tampa, we're still going to find out how that hurricane, both Milton and Helene, affected voters there. Pinellas County, just to the west of that, a big swing county. Orlando, that's a hub for Democrats. Duval County, we actually have some vote in Duval County. I want to take a look at this. This is Governor Ron DeSantis' old district when he was a representative. This has been a swing county. Biden won it, but Trump won it in 2016. Look, Harris is doing pretty well. In 2020, Biden was at 51. She's now at 50%. 66% of the vote is still out. This is a county that Republicans had hoped to flip. We're going to have to wait and see. But again, that vote's trickling in, but we can start to kind of read those tea leaves, Savannah and Lester, and kind of see where the vote's going. Again, still very early, but this is going to be, this has to be a win for Trump. If not, it's going to be a very long night for Republicans.
And a rapid pace there as well in the counting. We're seeing that in some places tonight.
We anticipate, of course, as Tom's just saying, that Florida is a good state for Donald Trump. It is also the first test of Trump's strength. So that is why all of those areas that Tom is just laying out, these are, again, very early data so far, but significant nonetheless, because it will help us, once we get in more, understand how strong he's.
Fun fact alert for those who remember the hanging chads of 2000.
Oh, yes.
Florida, in the wake of that debacle, has some of the fastest vote counting in the country. So I tell you, you will not be waiting for Florida for very long tonight. They really get that vote
said
counted
that for
very,
Georgia,
very
and they
quickly. They have the modern
rescheduled.
machines. They're allowed to pre-process the ballots. So you won't have to wait too long for that.
At this point, are we seeing anything unexpected, though?
So far, I do think the independent numbers are going to be really interesting to watch throughout the course of the night, especially in what we saw in those early national exit polls that a lot of people were identifying not as Republican, not as Democrat, but as independent. So that's a storyline to watch. I'll tell you another trend as we're talking about Florida. Osceola County has a large Puerto Rican population, the biggest of any county, I believe, in Florida. And this is something that I've heard in my conversations with Democratic campaign officials and those close to the campaign, that they feel like that is a part of the Latino population that they can really try to move the needle with here after those controversial comments from that opener for former President Trump?
Well, actually, let's go over to Tom on that. I should say the polls close at 8 o'clock in Florida, but you do get some information for 7 o'clock poll close timings. I think that's part of the confusion here. But we're talking about this Osceola County. It's a third
Split
Puerto
poll
Rican.
close, right, yeah.
Right. So it's interesting because you have the Latinos down in Miami-Dade. I know, go ahead and give your shout out. Miami-Dade is the greatest.
Just the greatest county, greatest people.
Yes.
I mean, I could keep going.
But obviously, this is, Latinos come from different backgrounds and have different voting patterns here.
Yeah, it is not monolithic, just like really every minority group. It is not monolithic. The Puerto Ricans have tended to vote more Democratic. Cuban Americans, Venezuelan Americans have trended lately more towards the Republican side. But I do want to remind you, too, during the Obama years, Obama was able to pull back some of that Cuban American vote. It has changed in recent years. We're getting more data. As you mentioned, Florida's very fast in putting in their data out. So we were talking about Osceola again, their big Puerto Rican population. The same with Orange. This is Orlando. This is a big Democratic stronghold here. Again, 60% in. Look, I don't want to draw too many inferences from this, but you have Biden at 61. Harris is at 58. You could say she's sort of underperforming, but I also want to say it's only 60%. And a bigger number that's coming in that I think is more important, guys, I want to talk about right now is Broward County. This is just north of Miami-Dade. Think about Fort Lauderdale, think about Sunrise, all those areas and those big cities that have been growing over the years, especially post-pandemic. This needs to be a place where Democrats really drive up the vote, right? Hillary Clinton won big here, 66%. Biden did the same at 64. Tonight, Harris is at 60. Again, I always point to this number, all the votes not in, but if you were to call it right now, she is slightly underperforming. We'll wait for that other vote to come in. Guys, over to you.
Tom, thanks very much. We are just minutes away from polls closing in Ohio and battleground North Carolina. We're standing by to make some new calls in the race for the White House. Stay with us.
They said 7:30. We're almost there, y'all. They were supposed to have the votes counted for Georgia and a couple more states at 7, but it wasn't done yet, so we gotta wait till 7:30, y'all. I know it ends at, I think, 10, the final one, so I'm gonna try to stretch it to 10, my live. Hopefully I can. So yeah. I don't know where they chose this beat from, but it's a little instrumental, but I need it. Hold on, I'm 26. I'll be 30 when the next election is. I'm 26. Is it 26? So I'll be 30 when the next president is going to be elected in 4 more years. 4 years ago, it was what? 2020? Was that mid-COVID, right? 2020? Yeah, that's insane, bro. It seemed like every 4 years is like the biggest BS going on in America and the world. Shit. COVID 4 years ago, now all this Diddy stuff going on, plus everybody's getting exposed and stuff. It's insane. So I don't even want to imagine what's going to happen in the next 4 years. COVID was just crazy, bro. Although I did love getting unemployment and staying home. I'm not gonna lie to you, I was getting bank off unemployment, I swear.
story of resilience and hope. Please take care of yourself and each other. Welcome back. We're going to be taking you to this view and these numbers here as we continue throughout the evening on the road to 270. Donald Trump out to the early lead with 19, Harris with 3. Let's look at a couple of races that have uncalled so far. We will start with Virginia, 13 electoral votes, just 1% in there in Virginia, but you can see Donald Trump at a widespread right now in Georgia. That's, of course, the first big prize in the among the swing states right now. Donald Trump with 90,000 votes. Kamala Harris, 86,000, but that's too early to call.
So we had some of our first poll closings. We await Arizona in a couple of hours from now. 11 electoral votes. We've got Gotti Schwartz there in Tempe, home to Arizona State University. Big lines there. A real split that you're seeing, that gender divide, Gotti.
Absolutely. Big lines, big turnout here at ASU. This is the 75-foot line. That's where the line starts. And let's take a walk, because this line is about 77 minutes long. If you're looking at the app, the line extends all the way down.
7-minute long line. You understand?
You were just talking about that gender gap, and we've been talking to a lot of the students here, a lot of the female students. They say that they've been driven to the polls by the issue of abortion and the issue of how they think Donald Trump treats women. And then you see a lot of males in this line, young guys here at ASU, many of them wearing those MAGA hats that have been given out along this line from organizers here. And they have been telling us that the reason why they are turning out is because of the economy, because of masculine identity. And they've also said, interestingly enough, people have been talking about the podcast wars here in this line, and Joe Rogan, that Joe Rogan podcast, the appearance. We were talking to a couple of guys just a little while ago. They said that they were open to the possibility of voting for Kamala Harris, but when the decision was made not to sit down with Joe Rogan, that influenced their vote. So it wasn't necessarily economy for them, but it was the idea that that Harris was not going to sit down, not going to show what they said was her true personality, and so that's why they decided to vote for Trump. Savannah?
All right, Gotti, thank you.
Both candidates have been courting Latino voters, a huge voting bloc, more than 36 million in the U.S.
We have Hallie Jackson here, who's been looking at the exit polls and can drill down on that a little bit.
And the reason we're talking about Georgia here is because that is a state where the polls have closed, so we can report out some of this exit poll data. Again, 600 polling places all across the country. It's early vote, it's mail-in vote, it's in-person day of, but it is early, right? So these numbers could shift a bit. But what we're seeing in Georgia on the Latino vote is interesting. It is Kamala Harris who is winning the Latino vote, 56%, to Donald Trump at 42%. But interestingly, if you look at the comparisons, former President Trump is doing slightly better with Latinos in Georgia than he did in 2020. He is slightly overperforming with that demographic group. And Jose, you know, and Savannah and Lester and Kristen, this is something the Trump campaign talks a lot about. They think that Donald Trump is going to do better than he did in 2020 with these demographic groups, including Black and Latino voters.
Well, let us bring Jose Diaz-Balart, our colleague, into this conversation because, you know, this effort to try to win over more Latino voters on behalf of the Trump campaign, it's never been about can we win the Latino vote. It's can we cut into her margins enough to make a difference, and are we beginning to see perhaps that strategy pay off?
Seven, I think the course set for the future of America tonight will have been chartered by Latino America. And we're not talking just about places like Nevada and Arizona, where 25% of the population, the eligible population to vote is Latino, but we're talking about Georgia, for example. 400,000 eligible voters are Latinos. We're talking about Pennsylvania, more than 500,000 eligible voters are Latino. And then, you know, Tom was just talking about Florida, 3.3 million. Latinos are eligible to vote there. I think that it's a situation where it's the Latino population.
Imagine every Latino voted.
36 million strong is participating, maybe in historic numbers tonight, in the American democratic experiment, our American democratic
And what's
experiment.
driving that?
I think what's driving that is that there is no Latino vote. There are Latino voters, each with their own individual American dream, with vicissitudes and barriers into what they see as the best future for their children and for themselves. And so I think that what we're going to see in Pennsylvania tonight will have a direct impact on what Latinos come out to say tonight. And in Arizona and Nevada, yes, but also in Georgia and in North Carolina.
Yeah, it's early on, but we're starting to see this flesh out a little bit. Jose, stand by with us. We're moments away now from another round of poll closing. Some big states at stake, including that former battleground, Ohio, and one of the newest battlegrounds, North Carolina.
We are moments away from the polls closing in 3 more states, including battleground North Carolina.
President Trump has won this state twice.
We're going to win North Carolina. We're going to defeat Kamala Harris.
This year,
North Carolina.
Kamala.
We will win.
This man's hilarious.
Kamala Harris is making a serious run for its 16 electoral college votes.
North Carolina. It all comes down to this.
Plus 2 major wild cards. Hurricane Helene decimating the western part of the state. And the Trump-supported candidate for governor.
Now to the scandal that's rocked the governor's race in North Carolina and could have national implications.
A possible drag on the Republican ticket.
We are standing by for the first vote count and new exit poll information for the Tar Heels state as our decision desk gets ready to make new calls on the road to 270. So that sets us up for nicely, Sam Brock, hard-hit Asheville, North Carolina. This was the part of Western Carolina that were really hurt by Hurricane Helene. And you're in Asheville now. What are you seeing there?
Sure, Savannah. So where we are right now in Buncombe County, which is the home of Asheville, certainly this is one of the most directly impacted areas by the storm. They're starting to pack up now. Just about an hour or two earlier, there was large applause here because they reached 1,000 people voting in person here at this precinct. And what's so interesting about this particular location is that it wasn't intended to be the voting site. In fact, the church that was supposed to be had helicopters delivering supplies, which is why they had to shift it.
What
It's
the
one of
hell?
about 17 different locations in
Dude,
this
not be
county,
playing.
Savannah, that had to shake things up. And as I talked to residents today, they basically told me they had a lot of confidence that the communication was good. They were able to find their location. And in Buncombe County alone, you had 116,000 people early voting and then 25,000 more today. These were record numbers in terms of just the overall presence. And the western part of the state, Savannah, and this is really what I want to drive home, outperformed the rest of North Carolina when it comes to early voting. That was at 56.7% in Buncombe, 58%, but then there were 11 different counties that exceeded 60% before people even came on Election Day. And I say all of this as you see cases of water over my shoulder, right? People are still doling out supplies. And just to give you a snapshot of what's going on the ground right now, people don't have potable water. You're staying at hotels where families are still displaced and they are just wondering when are they going to get their loans for their businesses? When will their employees be able to have stability? These are all the things that are weighing on folks' mind as they're still voting. Now, we talked about North Carolina as a wild card, as it projects strength in terms of some of the turnout here in the rural communities. You also have a scenario where women, 52% versus 41% for men. There was a big gap so far in early voting of women who are voting. And the conversations I'm having, many of them tell me that they do think abortion is front and center for them. We'll see how that plays out here in the hours to come.
All right, Sam Brock in Asheville, North Carolina, part of the region that has just been through so much, and yet so many people came out to exercise their right to vote. I want to go over to Tom Yamas because this is the battleground in 2020 that Donald Trump actually won, and he wants to try to hold on to it.
Savannah was the only one that he won in 2020, but it was his closest margin of victory. Let's take a look at North Carolina right now, and I'll take you back to elections past. So as we just mentioned, Trump wins here, but barely, right? He won it in 2016. He had a higher margin there. We go back to Romney. I want to go all the way back to Obama's first race. Obama won North Carolina, right? But since then, Republicans have been able to flip the state, but their margins have come down just slightly. I spoke with Governor Roy Cooper, the governor of North Carolina, who told me this is going to be their year. So how do they turn the vote out, and how do they flip North Carolina from red to blue? The 3 places they have to do it, the first one is Charlotte, Mecklenburg County. This is a majority-minority county, right? Jose was talking about the Latino voters. You have about 16% in Mecklenburg County, about 30% black voters there. They have to drive out those voters. The second place, this is the population center here, which is known as the Research Triangle. The capital, Raleigh, you have schools like NC State in Raleigh. Just next door in Durham, you have Duke. And then right next door to that in Orange County, you have UNC Chapel Hill. And finally, the Triad. A lot of people, if you don't know North Carolina very well, this is sort of the forgotten metro area. You have places like Greensboro and High Point, Winston-Salem, along with those historically black universities. These are the areas, guys, where they have to run up the vote. How does Trump win? Well, look at the state. You see how red it is. And here's the issue. It's one of the most rural battleground states. So Trump has to run up that rural vote. And then you were just talking to Sam Brock about the issue of hurricanes. Those are the hurricane counties right there. A lot of them are Trump country, with the exception of Asheville, Buncombe, where you have Appalachian State over here,
Asheville,
where Boone
what?
is. Those are Trump countries. Hopefully those people are going to go out and vote for him. That's what they need. Back to you guys over there.
All right, Tom, then the Democrats have put on quite the ground game there in North Carolina to try and flip that state in their direction, which would make their path considerably easier.
We got 3 minutes till this come back on. We have 3 minutes till the polls are in and are closed for a certain amount of states. Georgia being the one, because I live in Georgia, so that's why I'm here. All the polls closed, I believe at 10 o'clock, but you know, I don't know if I'm gonna be live for the next 3 hours, so we shall see. I would definitely be making video on what's going on though tomorrow, just in case you're not in this live right now. You know what I'm saying? But I figured since I was just chilling here, I got 2 monitors. I'm watching somebody play Fortnite on one monitor, and I'm watching these polls. So that's why I keep looking to my right on my other monitor. But I figure if I'm just chilling, so I might as well go ahead and live stream what's going on so far. So yeah, stay updated. Yep.
Begins with hope and optimism. A chance to start fresh.
7:30, y'all. 9 seconds left. Let's get it. Let's see what's going on. Yeah.
That brightens your day, because every day deserves the best start.
Welcome back to our NBC News election coverage. It's 7:30 in the East. We've got some new results to show you. West Virginia, Donald Trump is the projected winner.
Oh, Jesus. Come on, West Virginia.
Votes. Here's where it puts us on the road to 270. Donald Trump out in front with 23-3 for Kamala Harris.
Polls just closed in a handful of states. Here are ones that we cannot call yet: Ohio and the battleground of North Carolina.
You can call Georgia.
We've been talking about. Here's our projection at this hour. Too early to call, just not ready to release any information about that yet. Georgia is also too early to call.
Oh my God, you said too early an hour ago.
Now. And we do have a projection. This has to do with the United States Senate. West Virginia, the winner is Jim Justice. As expected, he will go to the Senate. This is a pickup for Republicans. This was a long-time held seat by Senator Joe Manchin, who was a Democrat, then an independent, but still caucused with the Democrats. Well, now the Republicans have picked up one Senate seat. As I turn to the table here, and Kristen, just so people understand, right now it's Democrats who hold a very narrow lead in the Senate, but they're looking to, the Republicans are looking to flip that tonight.
23-3 for the polls right now, y'all.
Seats. They just got one.
They just got one, so it is significant. We are looking at, and this was expected, as you say, Governor Jim Justice winning that seat. So they now turn to the state of Montana. They turn to the state of Ohio. Sherrod Brown looking for a fourth term there. He has gotten a pretty fierce challenge from a Trump-backed former car dealer, Bernie Moreno. So we'll see how that pans out. But one of the things, just zooming out a little bit, a lot of these Senate races have gotten a lot closer in recent weeks. Democrats who felt somewhat comfortable as we've gotten closer to Election Day have seen that margin really narrow. And again, this brings us back to this discussion of split ticket voters. Yes. In 1988, 17 states had different people vote for president versus Senate. That was down to one state last year, the state of Maine, when Susan Collins won, but the state went for Joe Biden. So we'll have to watch that very closely. But again, we were expecting that result out of West Virginia.
Ticket splitting has become more rare in the Trump era. However, it's making a comeback in some of these Senate races where people might vote for a different party for president than they do for the Senate.
That's one of the things we'll be watching closely.
And Hallie, you doing some more exit duty on North Carolina?
That's right. So now that North Carolina polls have closed, I want to talk you through some of what we're seeing from these exit polls numbers. And it is interesting here, right? First, we're going to take a look at the non-white vote in North Carolina. These are the black voters, include Latino voters that Tom was talking about in some of those key counties in North Carolina. As expected, Vice President Harris is winning non-white voters based on these early exit poll numbers. But take a look at Donald Trump here. He's got that 25% slice of the pie. Let me show you the comparison. He is outperforming where he was 4 years ago with non-white voters in North Carolina. He was at 19% in 2020. However, two things are also true here. Let me show you white voters here, and we can take a look at the comparison here. You can see that it is former President Trump winning with white voters at 61%, Kamala Harris at 39%. But again, take a look at the comparisons to 2020. She is actually outperforming where President Biden was back in 2020. She is doing better with white voters in North Carolina.
That's actually crazy.
So you might look at that and you might go, as we take a walk back to the desk here, you might go, okay, well, those two things, do they balance out? Not really, because white voters make up a larger share of the electorate in North Carolina than non-white voters. So she might be willing to make that trade, essentially.
All right, Hallie, thanks. I want to go back over to Tom. Tom, you've got some more information in Florida, but before you get into that, just to be clear, there's 2 poll closing times in the state of Florida.
Yeah, it's what we call a split poll closing. So on the eastern portion of the state, we have data coming in because the polls have closed there. We can tell you about the data. And some of the further parts of the panhandle, they haven't closed just yet, so we won't be giving you that data just yet. We'll probably wait another 30 minutes. I want to show you something that's somewhat surprising. It may surprise you if you watch presidential elections and you follow election nights like this one. So Donald Trump right now with 73% of the vote in is up 55% in Miami-Dade County. Again, this is where Democrats find their votes in the state of Florida. Biden won Miami-Dade County by 53. They've now flipped those numbers. This is pretty astonishing when you think where Hillary Clinton was in 2016, 63%, 53. Now tonight, 55. Again, there's still 73% of the vote left. This shouldn't be a complete shocker because Governor Ron DeSantis won Miami-Dade 2 years ago by about 11 points, which was a surprise at the time. But this shows how Republicans are expanding the map and how Florida is becoming more and more red. I do want to show you some potential good news, possibly for the Harris campaign, if they're watching tonight. So we're watching some of the vote come in Georgia. Remember, I told you more than 50% of the vote from Georgia is going to come around the Atlanta metro region. Let's take a look at some of these counties around Atlanta. 74% in Douglas County. Look at her number, 65%. Biden was at 61. So this means she's overperforming in the exact counties where she needs to find those votes. Let's look at another county here. Okay. Right now we have Gwinnett. We don't have any vote just yet in. Rockdale County, this is another big one. She's at 75%. Biden was at 69. So she's overperforming right now in some of these counties in the Atlanta metro region. Again, guys, this is where she has to drive up her vote. If she can expand the map, scale the Democratic vote there, they can hold Georgia. You remember this was such a close race 4 years ago. Any votes they can find in that Atlanta region is going to help them. Guys?
All right, Tom, thank you so much. We've got guests over at our Insiders desk today, and we also want to ask them what they're thinking of some of these early returns. We're starting to see some themes come out. We've got Cornell Belcher, we've got Mark Lauder. Cornell, I'll ask you what you think about what Tom just talked about. You had the story in Miami-Dade where it's potentially a big victory in that county, signs perhaps that that outreach to the Hispanic vote is working for Donald Trump, and yet in Georgia, you're starting to see some of that suburban vote really being ramped up for Kamala Harris.
No, I think that's right. Look, Florida is I think Democrats are going to look back at how we've not invested in Florida since the campaign I worked on, the Obama campaign. We've not invested and worked Florida well. And Florida's like a country. It's a really big, expensive state. I think we've taken those resources and we moved them more to battleground states like Georgia and North Carolina, where you see a sort of a difference. But Florida, you know, it's a state that Democrats did not invest a lot of money in, did not run a lot of advertising in, and it shows.
Let me bring in Mark Lauder, Director of Strategic Communications in the Trump 2020 re-election campaign, former spokesperson for Vice President Pence. Mark, give us your view as we wait for a call in North Carolina. What is the Harris camp right now thinking?
Right now, they're looking at turnout, I think. And really, for both sides, it's going to be all about turnout. Do you get your voters out? I've seen some, I've heard anecdotally from some of my colleagues on the campaign that turnout is not where it needs to be in the urban areas for Kamala Harris. It's overperforming in some of the rural areas, including the hurricane impacted areas. So I think that's a good sign for President Trump, but we're going to have to see how that plays out. Another thing I'm watching, and I know Tom alluded to it with Miami-Dade, but I also looked at Hillsborough County, Tampa Bay in Florida. It was both Hillary and Biden, both +7. Right now, it's only Kamala +1.
And Hillary Clinton actually did some campaigning there for this particular election as well. Mark and Cornell, thank you. We'll be back early and often as we go along here.
And we will take a break here. I think we're going to come back with more on the make or break state of Pennsylvania as the polls
These polls better close at some of them better close at 8. We're waiting for some polls to close since like 4 something. How long I've been live? I think it was after 4, but shit, I've been watching this without streaming basically all day. Damn, I'm only be streaming for an hour for like it's 10 hours already. Still though, man, it's not the point. The point is, let's go, man. Damn, what state did they say? Fuck. They said one of these states not gonna be done till tomorrow or noon. Like, damn, bro. Saw a goodie in a hoodie. We got 1 minute. We actually got 20 minutes to the next poll closing. Hopefully it's closing by then.
Do you pledge not to hold a vote on any legislation that would ban abortion? Do you still have faith and confidence in the Supreme Court? Is this plan to ban price gouging anything more than a gimmick? If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press.
We're back with our election night coverage and with Tom Yamas at the big board talking about the road to 270, waiting for North Carolina right now. The polls closed there. But how important is that to either candidate in terms of making their path to 270 easier or tougher?
Yeah, let's start with former President Trump because he really needs to hold North Carolina. It was the only battleground state he won in 2020. So let's give him North Carolina. If he holds North Carolina, he flips Georgia and Pennsylvania, he gets to 270. That's his easiest path. But Lester, if he can't win North Carolina, his whole map changes. And why do I say that? Because he can no longer win just 3 states. He has to win 4. He can do it by winning Pennsylvania and Georgia and keeping the blue wall, or I should say tearing down the blue wall, Michigan and Wisconsin. If he can't go there, he has to go out west and win both Nevada and Arizona. That puts him over the top. But again, without North Carolina, for his scenario, he needs 4 states.
Harris has put a lot of money and time and people on the ground in North Carolina. What does it do for her?
Well, look, if she wins these 16 electoral votes, it eases some pressure off her, right? Because her easiest path is the blue wall. If she can win Pennsylvania and North Carolina, look how close she is. She only needs 9 more electoral votes. Pretty much any other state, with the exception of Nevada, gets her there if she's able to win there. So if she can take North Carolina, the Trump team gets much more nervous and the Democrats become much more optimistic because she's won out east. If she can win in the Midwest and pick off a state out west or hold it, she's going to be the president.
All right, Tom, let's go back to Savannah.
We talk a lot about the blue wall. Wisconsin is a big part of it, and our correspondent Shaquille Brewster is in Milwaukee with some breaking news, and it's a possible issue with absentee ballot counting. Hey, Shaq, what do you know?
Hi there, Savannah. I want to first start with what we're seeing at these polling locations because locations are open for about another hour. I want to let you go inside. I can't go inside and report, so I'll let our camera go inside there now, where we've seen a steady flow of people. At this location, there was a line that went on for more than an hour this morning. You see things have slowed down a bit. The reports from around the state is that the vote process is going smoothly, but where we are seeing hiccups is with the vote counting. We just learned from the clerk in Milwaukee downtown, where they are counting all of the absentee ballots and early votes at once, that the city of Milwaukee had to restart the processing or counting of those absentee ballots. They say an observer saw that while the ballot tabulators were sealed, the door wasn't properly closed on them. And after going through with the bipartisan team and making sure that nothing was tampered with, the city, out of an abundance of caution, decided to restart counting all of those absentee ballots. What this means is that as we expect results from this battleground state of Wisconsin, you're going to have to wait a little bit longer. The clerk said in the past that they weren't expecting results from this city to come until after midnight Central Time. We now believe that timeline has shifted 2 to 3 hours later into the night. There's more than 100,000 ballots that those clerks are going to have to work through. So the vote is still ongoing right now, but be prepared to wait as those results come in later tonight, guys.
All right, Shaq Brewster in Milwaukee. We're used to waiting for Milwaukee until the wee hours of the night. I want to go back to the table here. Hallie, you've been looking at some of the exit polls. I think you've got some North Carolina information and some interesting results.
So there's some conventional wisdom here, and then there's some data that flips the conventional wisdom on its head. So let's talk about that, specifically as it relates to these age groups. We know, right, the Biden coalition in 2020 that propelled him to the White House involved young voters, right? And for our purposes, young is 18 to 29. In North Carolina, and I want to show you here, you can see that for older voters, and I'm talking senior vote here, former President Trump won those older voters. That is not unexpected. His campaign has long thought that he would do well with seniors. But here's what's interesting. Look at Vice President Harris. She's got 47% of the senior vote. She's doing better than President Biden did with seniors in 2020 in North Carolina. So she is outperforming where he was 4 years ago. Then you look at that youth vote, right? Again, not unexpected that Vice President Harris would have a slight lead. And I would say this is very close. We are waiting for more numbers to come in, more of these waves, as they're called, from the exit polls, but still interesting. But again, look at 48% for former President Trump. He is outperforming among young voters in North Carolina. So you have that kind of conventional wisdom. They're overall sort of winning the groups, at least to a degree that we thought they'd win. But each of them are overperforming on the sort of flip end of that.
All right, well, Savannah Sellers is here to talk about a huge role that the youth vote could play in the outcome of this election. What have you been seeing? You've been tracking a lot of the polls leading up to tonight.
Yeah, I absolutely have. And first, I want to dig in a little further on North Carolina and what Hallie just said, because if we dig even deeper in and we talk about gender in that under 30, it's similar to the trends that we've been discussing. Trump has improved what he did with young men. Tonight, 60% in our NBC News exit poll there say they support him. That is up from 42% that voted for him in 2020. Whereas with Harris, she's performing even better than Biden did with women. 65% saying that they support Harris in this exit poll, when 58% actually supported Biden.
Is that just North Carolina, or is that a national
That's just
poll?
North Carolina.
Okay.
That's our North Carolina exit polling tonight. North Carolina is really interesting to me because I've been talking with college Democrat and Republican presidents on campuses there, but the college Democrats were so organized in this state. Like, what they did on these campuses was really amazing. They lobbied the state to have more polling places on campuses. They even had it be made that the student ID could be an acceptable form of ID on several campuses, which was not the case prior. We're also seeing this kind of play out to be right what we're seeing with that young men appeal for Trump seems to be working in some places. I'm interested to see if that continues throughout the night. We heard Gotti mention like those podcast appearances earlier in the night, Joe Rogan, Logan Paul, things like that. This seems to be where he is gaining that ground. I'm interested to see if it continues in other battlegrounds.
And just underscoring how important the young vote is, the Harris campaign tonight touting the fact that they have Paul Rudd, for example, out trying to energize college voters in Pennsylvania. Jennifer Garner as well.
Keep them in line.
Stay in line.
Mark Cuban is FaceTiming voters in a 4-hour line at UNC Chapel Hill right now.
It speaks to how close this race continues to be as these results come in. On the other hand, you have the Trump campaign saying, hey, we're seeing good turnout in Philadelphia, yes, in the Trump areas. We'll have to see how that actually bears out when we start to get results in Philadelphia. But it does speak to the fact that there's a real focus on this epicenter and on young voters.
And when we talk about young men in particular, and to the point that you're making here at the table, that the Trump campaign has really looked to turn those young men out, they're not typically the people who show up to the ballot box every 4 years. They're what's called those low propensity voters we've been talking about. I will tell you that the Trump campaign feels like they've been doing a pretty good job trying to turn those, not always voters into voters at least this cycle, because for them, that's one of the big keys. If they can get this demographic out to the ballot box to actually show up, whether that was early or whether that's now, they're feeling like they're going to have some wind at their back.
It's, you take a step back, the story of this election is the gender gap.
Yes.
It's the battle of the sexes election, and whether you want to say it's young men or senior women, or it's men and women. If Trump turns out more men, he wins. If Kamala Harris turns out more women, she does. It's kind of as simple as that.
No doubt about it. And what's so fascinating is that the Trump campaign tried this sort of unusual, unconventional tactic to get out the vote, which was to outsource it to Elon Musk, to other outside groups. And they were quite bullish heading into tonight, saying, look, we feel good about this decision.
And remember, the Harris campaign was concerned about black men as well.
That's right.
They brought in President Obama to make the case. Any evidence right now how that appeal has translated into votes tonight?
Well, that's one of the things that she has talked about on the campaign trail. I sat down with the vice president not too long ago, and she feels like she needed to earn every single one of those black male votes just as much as Joe Biden would have. That's why you saw her. We talk about podcasts, doing like an NBA podcast, a football podcast. Sure, she did Call Her Daddy to try to reach out to those young women. That's the name of course, that very popular podcast with women. But she also was trying to extend an olive branch to men. I would just say this. Two things are true, right? Kamala Harris, let me say it this way. Donald Trump is doing better with men based on public polling right now than Kamala Harris is doing with women, though that gap exists. But also remember that historically, women have turned out more than men in every election dating back to 1980. And so that is going to be one of the big key factors into tonight.
And that's why that moment with former President Obama was so significant when he called on them not to stay at home.
All right. Well, we're just a few minutes away now from a big batch of poll closings at 8 o'clock Eastern time, including the one that everybody's been watching, Pennsylvania. And we'll be right back.
Where we at, man? Where we at, man? Where we at, man? Family just came over for a little bit. Where we at? Where we at? Where we at? They keep pushing the polls back, man. I do not want to stream this till 10 o'clock, but I just need a rough idea of where we at. I'll just make a video on who won and all that tomorrow. But where are we at? Make sure if y'all listen to me right now, if y'all watching this right now, if y'all listening to this right now, if y'all watching this right now, make sure y'all hit that like button on the video, on the stream.
News lives in the now.
Look at this. You can't even see anything anymore.
Let's break down what we know.
You gotta see this.
News for the generation of now is NBC News Now.
Welcome back to our live election night coverage. We're coming up on the 8 o'clock hour here in the East.
Bro, y'all said this so many times, bro.
Centers across the country in this historic election.
5 minutes, man.
Yeah, some polls have closed. In some places, people are still voting.
They are indeed. And we're about 6 minutes to the next poll closing, where we'll get our first look at the real vote count.
Trump is up 23-3. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on.
We are moments away from the polls
Fucking false are
closing in
tweaking.
16 states and the District of Columbia.
171 electoral votes up for grabs in the biggest haul of the night. Florida, with its 30 electoral votes, could be one of the first big calls of the evening.
And we'll get our first results from what may be the most important prize this election, Pennsylvania.
We love Pennsylvania.
It is good to be back in Pennsylvania.
The race could all come down to the Keystone State.
Pennsylvania is extremely crucial.
If Vice President Harris loses this state,
Pennsylvania, it all comes down to this.
her path to 270 narrows significantly.
We're going to win Pennsylvania.
So, Pennsylvania, are you ready to make your voice heard?
We're standing by for the first vote count and new exit poll information from this critical battleground as our decision desk gets ready to make new calls on the road to 270. All right, getting ready for Pennsylvania. NBC's Stephanie Gosk is in Philadelphia. Stephanie, this is where the Harris campaign really needs to ramp up those turnout numbers. What do you see?
4 minutes, ramp them numbers up, boy.
Yeah, they really do. Well, it's calming down here in North.
Come on, come on, come on, come on.
This is kind of a working class, diverse community. People still getting in under the wire in these last few minutes. But the big question, Savannah, afterwards is how long is it going to take to call the state of Pennsylvania? 4 years ago, it took until Saturday. I was on the phone with the former Secretary of the Commonwealth talking about the challenges they faced back then. 2.6 million mail-in ballots. That was what slowed the process down. And it was a new process for people in this state. 4 years later, they haven't changed the laws, but things are a bit better. There are fewer mail-in ballots, just under 2 million. They have new machines to process them and more people. But the optimistic outlook from election officials we have spoken to is that the majority of those mail-in ballots won't be fully processed until Wednesday night into Thursday morning. And if this race is as tight as it was 4 years ago, when Joe Biden won by about 80,000 votes, those mail-in ballots will be crucial to make the call here. So
Crucial.
Yeah, and in some of these big jurisdictions like Philadelphia, Stephanie, now they have election workers who are prepared to work all night and count all night, so perhaps it goes a little bit quicker. We'll check back with you a bunch. We have got Tom Yamas over at the big board, and you're still getting vote in from Georgia and North Carolina, two big pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah, and I want to talk about Georgia right now because North Carolina, there's still only about 2% of votes in. Let's look at Georgia because I think what is happening here when we talk about Kamala Harris and her chances, she's overperforming Biden in some of these counties around the Atlanta metro area. I'm going to move the map over this way because I'm going to bounce around. Here on this side, the right side, this is where Biden was at 2020. Here's where Harris is tonight, 76% in. You can see she's overperforming there. We come to this other county, Clayton County. Again, these are the suburbs of Atlanta, those ring counties around Atlanta. 84% for Biden, 85% for her, so she's holding that high watermark. We move over to Rockdale. Look at this, 69% for Biden, 75% tonight for Harris. They're looking at these numbers tonight, and again, there's still a lot of vote out, but they're looking at these numbers tonight, and they're telling themselves This is the kind of rhythm they want for the rest of Georgia throughout the night. Only 25% of the vote is in. Trump is way on top, but again, 25% of the vote is in. Remember, we can show you guys where the vote is out. These giant bubbles, the bigger the bubble, that's how many votes still have to be counted. So you can see a lot of the rural counties, a lot of them are coming in. There's still some in the rural county that are out, but the big area, remember, 50% of the vote is going to come around the Atlanta metro region. Let's also talk about Pennsylvania, guys, because we're getting close to getting some information in Pennsylvania. And remember this, 2020, Joe Biden wins the state. It is going to be the keystone state and the key to the election tonight. Trump won it in 2016. The difference, about 40,000 votes. In 2020, he wins by about 80,000 votes. Biden does. The interesting that has happened, and we've learned a lot about Philadelphia, the counties around Philadelphia, places like Chester, places like Montgomery County. Those people in the know call it Munco. We'll talk to Hallie about that, as well as Kristen Welker as well. Delaware County, Delco, and Philadelphia County. This area right here, this makes up about 30% of the vote for Pennsylvania. We're going to be watching what happens here. What's interesting that happened here in 2020, so Biden actually underperformed Clinton, but he overperformed in those suburbs. So we'll be watching what happens there. You also have these swing counties here, the Lehigh Valley, Monroe County, part of the Poconos, Northampton, and Lehigh. Lots of Hispanics there. We're going to see what happens. And we are so honored to have both Kristen and Hallie, people who know about Wawa. They know about Eagles fans. They know about steaks. Come on. How good is Wawa?
Phillies.
Always.
The best.
Always.
But Tom, you forgot to ask them.
I miss Wawa, man. Living in fucking Georgia.
Okay.
I love Georgia, though.
Okay.
Where's Widow?
All right. Well, we have a lot of time just to do Philly talk. We won't leave Pittsburgh out, but we got we're coming up on a poll close.
Yeah,
here.
21 seconds until the top of the hour. Another poll close, and we're going to hear from about 17 states here coming up at the top of the hour. And there's
17 states.
Election alert as we stand by, and the drama building now because as we've been talking about, we're going to see Pennsylvania. Those are the other states that the poll closings are about to occur in fact about 1 second. And we'll be able to get some characterizations for you here in just a moment. We'll look at those 8 o'clock poll closings. Here's an NBC News projection. State of Florida. NBC News projects that Donald Trump will win Florida and take its 30 electoral votes. The state of Massachusetts, Kamala Harris, the projected winner tonight with 11 electoral votes. Donald Trump, the projected winner in Tennessee tonight. 11 electoral votes there. In the state of Maryland, NBC News projects that will go in the Kamala Harris column. We move on to the state of Missouri. NBC News projects that Donald Trump is the victor in Missouri when all the votes are counted. Here's what Alabama looks like. That will also go to Donald Trump. State of Oklahoma, this will be projected to go to Donald Trump. And in D.C., District of Columbia, 3 electoral votes at stake. NBC News projects that Kamala Harris will win there. So where does it leave us now in the road to 270? There it is, 90 for Trump right now, 27 for Harris, 270, of course, the magic number and the keys to the White House.
Well, we await calls in those all-important battlegrounds, and there are still outstanding states. Just as polls closed at 8 o'clock, we will wait for New Jersey, Illinois, Connecticut, and, of course, Pennsylvania as well. Let's show you what we can right now in Pennsylvania. No surprise here. It is too early to call.
Oh my God!
They do count fast there, but not fast enough to call it. It's still.
If I wait one more hour for bro.
In Georgia, we're seeing a lot more of the vote, but still too early to make a projection. Let's go to Tom, who's starting to look at some of the numbers
they might
here.
make me end my life.
Virginia up there, which is a potential bellwether, something that might give us some indication about how this night might go.
Yeah, and it's a state that we can look at to see how the suburbs are going to perform across the country. I know a lot of you guys know the D.C. area very well. 30% of the vote is going to come from these northern suburbs. It's a good barometer to know also how Harris is doing with suburban women. So let's go to 2020 to compare here. So Prince William County, it looks like Harris is slightly down with 75% of the vote in. This one stood out to me. 95% of the vote is in Loudoun County right now. Biden was at 61%. Harris is now at 56%. Again, there's a difference of about 35,000 votes. 95% is in, and we can actually see how much of the vote is left. Only about 3,600 votes remain in Loudoun County. So she's underperforming a little bit there. As we keep going here, Fairfax County, 45% in. She's at 68%. Let's see how Biden was doing there. 69, about the same. Something else that's interesting that's happening in Virginia, Virginia Beach. This is a swing county. Trump won it in 2016. Biden was able to flip it. Tonight, Trump is on top, but only about 20% of the vote is in. A lot of the western part of the state, as we know, is going to be more rural. Some of that coal mining country, it's going to resemble West Virginia. We have some of the vote in a county like over here, Wise County. This is a good Trump barometer. He's at 78%. He was at 80% in 2020, but 41% of the vote is out. He's underperforming slightly. I guess the thing that sticks out to me, which it's too early to know if it's a red flag, but Loudoun County, again, you know, this is a place where Democrats want to run up those votes in Virginia. Not that Virginia is in danger for Democrats because they were able to run up the score in 2020, but Trump in 2016 got close. He got within 5 points. A number like this, it's going to worry them a little bit, but I know you guys know much more about that area than I do.
Well, actually, we're honored to have a resident of the Commonwealth of Virginia with us, Chuck Todd. So, I mean, you look at that, you know those suburban collar counties around Washington, D.C. very well. Is that a warning light if Kamala Harris is not performing as well as Biden did in some of those suburban, exurban counties?
It could be if we're going to see that if it's moving. You know, Virginia is sort of the gateway now to the north rather than being, I always joke, it's sort of seceded from the Confederacy, right? It is the one southern state that has been consistently a Democratic state, not even a swing state anymore. So if that is consistent, yes. One thing I've learned, though, with the Northern Virginia vote, you may have 95% of the vote in, that 5% can account for a lot more uncounted vote than people realize. So, and there is a sense, so that's a wait and see. Look, the bigger thing that I've taken away so far is we are seeing, we're in the middle, we've been in the middle of a political realignment for a decade, and every one of these presidential elections, we're like, hey, look at this. The fact of the matter is Donald Trump's makeup of his electorate this time is much different than it was in 2016 or 2020. And I think we're seeing it both break on ethnicity and geographically. So it looks like that Donald Trump's going to be stronger in the Southeast. Why? Because he is doing better with Hispanics.
That's right.
And there is a larger population of Hispanics in the Southeast and the Southwest than any other part of this country. The exit polls indicate that she is going to do better with older white women. I've been messing around with Indiana. Indiana's not going to, it's a red state. Donald Trump's underperforming about a point or two in almost, even in the rural counties. Indiana's a very white state. That's a tea leaf.
Yeah,
I just throw it out there. It's a tea leaf. They obviously border
where those voters go.
No, that she's performing a couple of points better. So clearly there are some
it's the
older whites, and we could really see this country divided by regions where she's stronger in the north because she's improving with white voters, and he's stronger in the South because he's improving with voters of color, in particular Hispanic voters. We're not seeing as much evidence among African-American voters, but definitely Hispanic voters. It's not just Florida. I think Georgia, we're seeing it as well.
Well, we're seeing it nationally, too. And you look at some of the numbers here, he is +10 specifically with Latino men, according to our exit poll nationally, a demographic group that Joe Biden was +23 with 4 years ago. So it is definitely a shift, and it is definitely one of the headlines that we're watching as we're seeing these exit polls come in.
And we see that, I mean, the Latino vote is not just concentrated in the Southwest.
That's exactly right.
It's not just the Southeast. It's also in Pennsylvania. There's a huge Latino population in Pennsylvania.
We have been talking about the ground game quite a bit. It's been heavily focused in Pennsylvania on trying to energize Latinos on both sides. Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump really focusing on that in places like Allentown, in places like Reading, Pennsylvania, trying to make sure that they are getting them out to vote and flipping them if necessary.
And let's not forget Kamala Harris wrapped up her campaign last night in Philadelphia, showing once again demonstrating the importance of that state, as we are going to find out here in the hours to come and perhaps days.
And Hallie, you've got some more from your exit polls.
You know, it's interesting. Chuck's talking about the graceful removal from the chair. Thank you all for bearing with me. Chuck's talking about the realignment here and where people are sort of politically. One of the things we're watching on that front is this idea of independent voters. We know that they are going to be potentially a crucial voting bloc here. Vice President Harris had made overtures to this group in the closing weeks of her campaign, really trying to win them over, to get them over to her side. Look at how they're breaking nationally here. She is winning independent voters nationally, 51%, Donald Trump 44%. Here's the thing. Nationally is not how you win or lose the White House. You win the White House in the battleground states. And look at the state of states, Pennsylvania, right? The most key battleground this year. In Pennsylvania, it's the opposite. It's former President Trump who is actually leading with independents over Vice President Harris in this really important state where the margins could be really close here. You can see it here. He's at 50%. She's at 44%. Again, that's in Pennsylvania. So you might ask, okay, well, how does that compare to how he did 4 years ago? He is overperforming generally with independents now in Pennsylvania. You see in 2020, 44%. He's doing a bit better now in 2024, 50%. And Savannah, Lester, Chuck, Chris, and I'll toss it back to you at the table table. This could be really interesting as we watch this develop throughout the course of the night, not just in Pennsylvania, but in some of these other key battlegrounds as well, like Michigan and Wisconsin, which we'll get to later.
Actually, I think Chuck wanted to weigh in.
No, I just think we are seeing something else happen, which is you have a country that's really sour about our politics, sour about the direction of the country, and we now have fewer people identifying with the two major parties, according to our exit poll. It's a huge development. Independents are the fastest growing flock. Now, it's very rational. If you don't like the direction of the country, you don't like what's happening, and you think there's a threat to democracy, do you have a lot of faith in the two major parties? But the lowest share of major party people identifying with the two major parties in at least 4 elections, it means these independent votes are going to be the whole ball game. They're going to decide who's president.
We are keeping a sharp eye on the state of Georgia. We can show you where things stand. We've just had a change of characterization here. Our characterization from the decision desk now is that this is too close to call. You can see about a 267,000 vote difference between the two, with 37% of the vote in. But again, the NBC News characterization at this point, too close to call in Georgia.
We've got a lot of contributors lined up to talk to you tonight. We've got Senator Claire McCaskill, I believe, over at our insider's desk. And Senator, I wonder what you thought about that. What some are seeing is something of an alarm bell. This Loudoun County, suburban Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia, where it seems that Kamala Harris is underperforming. And as you well know, the suburbs in the battleground states are key to her victory.
Yeah, listen, this is the witching hour. You know, this is when it is very early. We have exit polls. And by the way, if exit polls were correct, I would be governor and John Kerry would have been president and Hillary Clinton would have been president. So I think we've got to take all of that with a big, giant grain of salt and wait for the actual numbers to come in. Because as we all know, these come in from different places. Typically, rural places come in before urban locations. So I think she's going to be fine in the suburbs. I think, and I don't think the exit polls will actually reflect accurately what will happen with independent voters. I'm not saying she's going to dominate independent voters, but I'll be very surprised if there aren't a whole lot of women that call themselves independents that don't vote for Donald Trump.
At what point in all this do you begin to let out a sigh of relief here?
Well, listen, I think depending on what happens in Georgia and North Carolina, if by any chance she wins those 2 states, then I can breathe again. If she does not, then obviously Pennsylvania becomes even bigger. And don't sleep on Nevada. I think that may be the closest margin in this race. I think it may be literally maybe 500 to 2,000 votes separating the 2 candidates. I think it's that close in Nevada.
Well, we're waiting polls to close there in less than an hour. Nevada and Arizona, those big western battlegrounds, but we do not expect results there, frankly, for days. So I guess Senator McCaskill is going to be holding her breath for a very, very long time. We've got Sarah Fagan here, too, a veteran of Republican campaigns. And again, with all the caveats, we are reading tea leaves right now, Sarah. What are you looking at? What are you noticing? And how do you see this shaking out?
So if you look at Florida, you look at Virginia, Donald Trump is running about 4 points better than he did in 2020. But then contrast Georgia and North Carolina, where I should caveat that less of the vote is in. He's running 1 point ahead in Georgia. He's running a little behind in North Carolina, where he did in 2020. And that says to me perhaps that the Harris GOTV effort is quite strong, that she's pulling her votes out in places where the campaign organized. So she's holding that margin closer.
And the GOTV, for those of you just joining us on Political Nerd Fest, get out the vote, the ground game, what we're talking about it. You know, this is about when you say, you pull the bus up and you say, let's go, we're going to hold you by the hand and take you to the polls. And organizing is the key to any successful campaign.
Absolutely, and you have the Harris campaign touting the fact that, for example, they knocked on 3 million doors over the weekends. It winds up being numbers, though, until people actually go to the polls and vote. And I do think, just bouncing off something that Chuck said earlier, it's just to zoom out for a moment. Remember that one of the biggest issues of this campaign
roll to 270. He's up 90 to 27.
So what you saw in both of their closing arguments was an attempt to argue they're the change candidate. And so what
Senate, they're up 42 to 31 Republicans.
Because I think the person who winds up winning this race will be the person who ultimately voters say, that's the change candidate.
And like everything in this election year, it's complicated because you have a former president, so there's a certain incumbency there, and a sitting vice president, and there's certain incumbency there as well.
There's something baked into Donald Trump's call for a change here because he was already in the White House for 4 years. Same thing for Vice President Harris as you're looking at the popularity or favorability rating for President Biden, which is low. And so the question, is that going to be a drag on how she does? To your point on the get out the vote effort, this is why early vote was critical for both of these campaigns, with some 79 million people voting early. Better to bank those votes. What if somebody gets sick? What if somebody's kid has to stay out of school or whatever? Get those votes in now to get them locked and loaded.
Let me just change the conversation just for a moment, because we do have another call to make, and it's an NBC News projection in the state of South Carolina. South Carolina will go to Donald Trump when all the votes are counted later. And here's the breakdown right now that Donald Trump, again, the projected winner. 24% of the vote in there, a vote difference of about 104,000. But again, Donald Trump will pick up South Carolina. Here's where it leaves us on the road to 270. Donald Trump out in front with 99. Kamala Harris, 27.
We've got a few key battlegrounds where polls have closed. They're counting, but we don't have results yet. Still either too early to call or too close to call. Let's go to NBC's Garrett Haake. He's at Trump headquarters in West Palm Beach, Florida, Mar-a-Lago. Tell us what the campaign is saying.
Damn. Bro,
well, Savannah, what seems to be
he's up 99 to 27.
What they're seeing out of Georgia right now, as we were just discussing, where their key to victory was essentially blowing the doors off in rural
it's not over,
and improving
but
their margins among minority voters, Latino voters, black voters. The campaign is seeing, in the same exit polls we're looking at, improvement among black voters, particularly black men, who the Trump campaign has
too early
for months and months and months to try to win over even just a few percentage points, the kind of thing that could make a difference in a state decided by fewer than 12,000 votes 4 years ago. The other thing that I think has accrued to Trump's favor in Georgia is the resumption of unity among Georgia Republicans. Remember, there was a huge fallout with Brian Kemp, the popular Republican governor there, after 2020. Trump and Kemp made amends, although they rarely appeared together on the campaign trail. The two singing from the same hymnal in the race's closing weeks, along with a lot of these other Trump candidates, could be helpful to Trump in that state.
All right, Garrett, we have a call to make. This is North Carolina, the governor's race there. Josh Stein, the Democrat, takes the race there. He faced off against the Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, a very controversial candidate, and the polls had showed, well, we talked about ticket splitting, where perhaps the vote for the presidency might be different than the vote down ballot. This perhaps will be an indication of that. Josh Stein, the winner of the governor's race in North Carolina. Just a brief word about this controversial lieutenant governor candidate. You both are jumping to tell me who wants to take.
Let me just say one
hours to go here.
One small thing, which is this, because Kristen will get into, I think, how controversial this Republican gubernatorial candidate was.
You're leaving that to me.
But just remember the ticket splitting piece. This is a state that has ticket split president, governor before. That's it, right? So this, I think,
they have a Democratic governor right now.
That's exactly right. So if somebody's looking at this going, well, the Democratic governor won in North Carolina, doesn't that mean maybe that Vice President Harris is a lock? It does not. And just to throw that out there, this is a state that where Republicans know how to check a Republican for president and a Democrat for governor.
But this was a campaign on Mark Robinson's behalf. It was beset by problems.
Beset by problems because he was determined that he posted some highly controversial comments on an adult website. And so the backlash was massive.
That was crazy. I did a video on that. That was crazy.
That was, by the way, one of the controversies. I'm giving you the biggest one. The question is, will he drag down support for former President Trump? We don't know the answer, but we do know that in 2020, President Biden was not able to win this state because there was, in part, it's believed, a controversial Democratic candidate for Senate. And that did sink his chances. Now, just to zoom out a little bit, a Democrat hasn't won the state of North Carolina since 2008, when Barack Obama did it. Trump added 3 campaign stops in these closing days of the race.
Spent the whole weekend there, 3 days straight in North Carolina.
How important this state is to his path.
Also a sense that it might have been slipping away and trying to shore up.
Absolutely.
Well, North Carolina was very, very tight in 2022. Trump won it, but it was right up there in terms of narrow margins.
Which
Absolutely.
And it's a good reminder that even if the electoral vote count ultimately has a pretty wide gap, these margins can be very tight, and those electoral votes, listen, they all go to the winner, right? So that's what matters here in a state like North Carolina.
Well, we already talked to Garrett Haake, who was in West Palm at Trump headquarters. Let's go over to Peter Alexander. He's at the Harris headquarters in Washington.
Hey, Savannah, you just heard from Garrett a moment ago talking about how Donald Trump's team seems to be satisfied that he is doing a bit better with those black and Latino voters right now. Similarly, the Harris campaign feels good that she is outperforming with white voters over Joe Biden's performance with them in some of our early exit poll indications in parts of the country right now. One thing they're keeping an eye on. Another thing I'm hearing from senior officials within the campaign as they get ready to start the program here is that they are seeing really good enthusiasm among those youngest voters, those college students in particular right now. They're talking about long lines. You know what, let me do this. They're starting the Star-Spangled Banner. I'll give it back to you with respect to our country, then we'll come back in a moment.
I'm not standing.
All right,
I'm
Peter,
not
that is
like
Harris
standing.
headquarters in Washington, D.C. We've got Tom Yamas over at the big board.
Yeah, we're talking Georgia, right? Because it is so close. A reminder here, we're talking about Democrats feeling a little hopeful in North Carolina, Republicans feeling a little better about Georgia. If they swap, right, if Democrats win North Carolina and Republicans win Georgia, they're both 16 electoral votes. We're back to square one where we were in 2020. Let's talk about Georgia tonight, because what we're seeing is both camps are overperforming, so it's going to be a nail-biter. Remember, in 2020, it came down to about 12,000 votes, a little under that. Let's start in Atlanta, the metro region. Cobb County, we have 57% of the vote in. And let's see how Biden did, 56%. This is actually, Cobb County tells the story of the Atlanta metro region. Newt Gingrich represented Cobb County, and look how Democrats have been able to run up the score. From Romney in 2012, Clinton flips it, and look how they're growing the margins. And tonight, that's exactly what Kamala Harris is doing. She's growing the margins in Cobb County. Let's go around. Let's see what we have in Fulton. Fulton, 53%. Let's see how that compares to Biden, 72. She's holding her own around the Atlanta metro region. Let's see over here. Gwinnett, we only have about 1% in, not really worth a discussion there. Clayton County, 70% in, slightly overperforming Biden. That's pretty good. We'll keep moving. Henry County, 1% in. This is one of those swing counties we can talk about. You know, 1% in. I don't know how much we're going to be able to say there. Rockdale County, again, those Atlanta suburbs, 77% of the vote in. She's overperforming there. Okay, that's Harris. That's the Democrats. Let's go to these rural regions. Rayburn, 95% in. Trump at 78 in 2020. He's at 78 right now. You can see he's holding his marks. Union County, a little bit lower, but again, he's around the 80% mark where he should be, and overperforming in White County. Again, those are the rural counties. Let's go to Georgia's Black Belt, where they have counties with lots of African-American voters. Here in Doherty, this is about 70% African-American here, slightly overperforming Biden. So again, guys, what I'm trying to say here is that right now, it's very similar to what we saw in 2020. Trump seems to be hitting his marks where he was in the rural counties. In those African-American counties and around the Atlanta region, Democrats are hitting those marks. It's going to be very close. It's one of the reasons why when we click on Georgia right here, it is literally just too close to call, guys.
All right, Tom, we got a lot ahead here. We're going to take a break and then another state closing its polls. Which candidate will it bring closer to those crucial 270 electoral college votes? We will be right back.
Whew, Trump is ahead by a lot, y'all. This is not looking too good for us, but it's okay. This is absolutely fine. It was almost, I think it was supposed to be 8:30. Polls supposed to close again. How long does it take for the polls to close, man? I know it's a big decision. As long as they get everything right, we good. As long as they get everything right, y'all.
Nice to have you along with us, whether you're at home or on our plaza. We're just glad you're with us this morning.
News lives in the now. It's coming at us every second. News is more now than ever.
This monster and historic storm is set to make landfall.
Now is raw.
What was your initial reaction? Devastating.
Now is real.
Voters are voting. It's here. It's happening.
Now is constant.
You gotta see this.
Future is now. News for the generation of now is NBC News Now.
8:20 in the east, 5:20 in the west. We've got some major battlegrounds close their polls, and the votes are being counted as we speak. That's the road to 270, filling out a bit with some predictable wins and losses in this country. But let's go to the battlegrounds. Virginia is too early to call, just 33% of the vote in. We'll continue to watch it. Ohio. The polls have closed there. It is too early to call, although that once battleground is now more a reliably red state. We'll see how that shakes out. Pennsylvania. Stop me if you've heard Pennsylvania very much during this campaign season. It may all hinge on the Commonwealth. Too early to call there. And in Georgia, we have characterized this as too close to call. So we are about halfway through the vote counting there, 50% in. And though you see that margin, depending on where the votes are coming from, it is our expectation that right now this vote in Georgia's 16 electoral votes just too close to call.
All right, let's go over to Hallie Jackson with some new exit polling information on the gender gap.
So this has been a storyline we're talking about all night, right? We say it, Savannah, Lester, you both said it, the battle of the sexes, men versus women. It gets a little bit more complicated at that, but let's start with the gender gap nationally here. And you can see it absolutely still exists. So these are our exit polls nationally based on gender. You can see, obviously, this is just the vote here. Women, 53%, 47% men. Typically what we might see. When you get into vote break, I'm going to ask our team to pull that up. You are seeing that more women are backing Vice President Harris. More men are backing former President Trump. More women, 55% for Harris, Trump 43%. We'll go to men, and you'll see it flips, right? That red slice of the pie gets a little bit bigger for Donald Trump when it comes to men nationally, and we'll pull that up so you can see it. The other piece of this, though, there's more to it, right? And when you get a little bit deeper in race and education, that is where this gets really key. And for that, you look at white college-educated women. We've been talking about this demographic a lot here in some of these key swing states. She is doing better with white college-educated women. Donald Trump is doing better with non-college educated white women, and that is another piece of the gender gap dynamic that's at play here.
Well, actually, we have a historic gender gap potentially, and we have a historic education gap potentially. And I want to bring in our panel. We've got Sarah Fagan, who is here. She was a veteran of the Bush White House, George W. Bush, the political director there, and Senator Claire McCaskill of the great state of Missouri that was once a swing state as well. You were a Democratic senator.
Way back when.
Way back when. So we've talked a lot about the gender gap, but I think the education gap is key here too. When you hear what Hallie says, Senator, what's your take?
I think, you know, we have so many divides at this point. We have urban, rural. We have college educated, non-college educated. But the big one this election are women and men. And yes, there is a difference between college educated women and non-college educated women. But the support for Harris is so big among college educated women. And the key in this election, I think, is are they going to drag their husbands, their sons, their uncles with them over to the Trump side? Because these are my peeps, right?
Are those the shy Harris voters?
College-educated older women.
Yes.
I mean, you know, I live in that place.
Is this the battle of the sexes, or is that being overplayed?
Well, I do think that college-educated women are a critical, if not the critical voting bloc in this election. And, you know, Hallie, you pointed out that according to the exit polls, it's 53% of the electorate. In 2020, it was 52. Now, 1 point doesn't seem like a lot, but, you know, if Kamala Harris drives up her results among women, in these close contests like Georgia and Pennsylvania, like that could be a deciding factor.
You know, I can't believe we haven't actually talked about it yet tonight. Reproductive rights. This is the first presidential election post-Dobbs, the decision that overturned Roe versus Wade. We've seen the potency of that issue. Abortion rights measures have passed every time they've been on the ballot since the Dobbs decision, but we haven't yet had a presidential election. Right. Do you think that issue still has its potency and is a weak spot for Republicans?
I think it has its potency for sure. It definitely cuts both ways, meaning, you know, you see about 10% of the electorate on both sides of the issue for whom that is the most important issue. But there's no question among younger voters, especially younger women, that's an issue that is driving them out. And so the question is, you know, really, is that the main issue they're voting on, or is that one of many issues they're voting on?
Yeah, and I think, frankly, when we look at this, if Kamala Harris wins the presidency, we're going to talk a lot about how the women got her there, but I don't think we should ignore the fact that college students are playing a big role today. The lines, the overperformance at college campuses right now, whether you're in North Carolina or Pennsylvania or Wisconsin or Nevada, on the ground, I've talked to the team that's running the ground game in all of these states. They have never seen this kind of response on college campuses. So we may have a divide there between kids in college that are voting age and kids who aren't in college that are voting.
Is that playing out just in a few states or across all the states?
In all of the states, they're exceeding their model on how many people are voting at these college places that are primarily college campuses.
We can put up the Florida abortion ban. Remember, there are 10 states with abortion on the ballot tonight, and we can show you how Florida Amendment 4. This, by the way, requires a 60% to reach the 60% level. So right now, not there yet. We're not making a call, but that's.
It's been interesting to see these ballot measures. We have one in Florida. You mentioned there are abortions on the ballot literally in 10 states,
99
2 of
to
them
27.
battlegrounds, Nevada and Arizona.
Tough.
Some of the battlegrounds, Michigan, for example, had abortion on the ballot 2 years ago, lifted Democrats' prospects in Michigan. Now, is there a question in your mind, Senator McCaskill, whether or not Democrats who might have been motivated to go to the polls on the abortion issue feel like, oh, well, it's already taken care of? People are kind of in the middle thinking, I can vote for Trump even because I think I've already taken care of this abortion question with regard to the ballot measure in a battleground like Michigan.
I don't know. I think ProPublica has done such an amazing job of publicizing the deaths to women because of Trump really extreme abortion bans that are in many, many states. And Texas isn't a battleground state, but there's a Senate race out there that I've got a half an eye on tonight. And I think when you have women dying who want to have the children, who are suffering a miscarriage and can't get the health care they need, that takes it to a different level. And I don't think we had very many of those stories out there in 2022 like we have in 2024. And I think the campaign has certainly emphasized those stories and the brave women telling them.
And I also think that this is an issue that Republicans have struggled to find their footing on. Sarah and I have talked quite a bit.
Let me just pick up that thought in a moment. We have an election alert now. This is a poll closing here at the 8:30 hour in the East. Arkansas will
4 seconds.
Closing here momentarily. We'll perhaps get a characterization. That's the only one at 8:30 we're going to see. And here's the projection. NBC News can project that Donald Trump will win in the state of Arkansas when all the votes are counted. 6 electoral votes. Here's where we are on the map to 270. That leaves Donald Trump at 99 electoral votes, 27 for Harris. Again, the goal, 270.
All right, let's go to the battlegrounds. Georgia's race for president too close to call at this hour. 53% of the vote in, just too close to make a prediction there. Pennsylvania too early to call. They're just getting started in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And North Carolina also too early to call. We do have more vote there, but we're just not in a position yet to call those races. However, Tom, as I go to you, these are some of the races. Georgia and North Carolina, these are fast counters. And we may be able to make a call by the middle of the night or in the early hours this morning, and that would be quite telling.
Yeah, our decision desk guidance is that Georgia and North Carolina both improving the way they tabulate votes. We should have a projected winner some point tonight. Those will be the 2 first battlegrounds that we hope to project and we hope to call at some point earlier tonight. But we'll have to wait and see. We're ready for anything. We could be surprised by anything. I want to talk about Virginia for a little bit, and a caveat here, as Chuck Todd reminded us. Northern Virginia, the suburbs, they do sort of report late. That vote is still coming in, but we still see some troubling signs for Kamala Harris, at least in some of these counties. So Biden was at 61%. 95% of the vote is in, and I just want to highlight this. There's only about 2,800 votes remaining, so not a lot of votes going to come in. She's at 56%, 57%. 61% was where Biden was. As we keep going around, my team flagged another county. Fairfax County, she's doing fine. Prince William, though, underperforming here as well. 80% of the vote is in. Biden was at 62. She's at 58. Again, these are suburban women, highly educated, college degrees, sort of your establishment Democrats. These and a growing area of Virginia as well. A lot of people move here for the jobs, to work in government as well. Again, it's still very early. We're still waiting for all the votes to be called in Virginia. An area we watch too is Chesterfield. This is just south of Richmond. African Americans who originally lived in Richmond moved out to places like Chesterfield and Henrico as well. It's one of those swing counties. Biden won in 2020. Trump won it in 2016, so we're keeping an eye on it. And you see, this is where Biden was in 2020. This is where Kamala Harris is tonight, 49.4, but there's only 35% of the vote in, so still a lot of vote to be counted there. So we're going to stay and watch that. As we move further west, we have some counties out here, rural counties. This is Wise County. This is Trump country near West Virginia. You can see 94% in. He was at 80.4 in 2020.
Trump country is crazy.
81.6. Again, how does he win states like Virginia? They're going to run up the votes in the suburban areas, the Democrats. He runs up the votes in the rural areas, so that's going to be good there for the Republicans if they want to hold those marks. Virginia Beach, this is another area we're going to be watching. Again, an area that sometimes tends to swing. Trump with 48% in 2016. Biden was able to flip it, 30% in. Again, still early, but Trump is ahead there. So we're watching Virginia, guys, and we'll see what happens. We're still waiting for some of the vote to come in here, but some signs that, you know, maybe trouble Democrats, maybe they trouble Republicans as well. We're going to have to wait. Back to you guys.
All right, we shall wait. We do have a key projection right now. The state of Delaware, the home state of the sitting president, Joe Biden, will go for Kamala Harris as expected. Here's how the vote shook out, just 48% in, but this is an easy projection with the margins as they are expected to be. So here's where we fill out our map. At 8:30 on the East Coast, Delaware being added to the tally for Kamala Harris. Donald Trump leading as some of these big states in the South, which are expected to go his way, are starting to report in. Speaking of the South, we've got NBC News correspondent Allison Barber. She's in the key county of Gwinnett County, Georgia. First vote starting to come in there. And what are you hearing? We've got both campaigns really laser focused on this area.
Yeah, they care a lot about this county, Savannah. Let me just show you, because we've just started to see precinct captains coming in with their memory cards, with the votes that happened in person on Election Day. You see this line that goes out the door around. What you're looking at are all of the precinct captains from Gwinnett County. Ultimately, what they're doing is they're coming in here. They have with them little bags that are secured with the official election seal on the top of the envelope and memory cards, and at least 2 from each precinct that have the total of votes for today. So they come in here, they check in with these folks, and then they ultimately take their memory cards to the different election workers that are sitting around here, and they open up, they look at those envelopes, make sure they're sealed properly, make sure it has everything necessary by Georgia law inside of it, and then they send them back into this room here, where we start to see those votes processed and then sent out to the public. In addition to all that's happening on here, back here, and come with me, we'll weave a little through everyone here, there's more counting going on in the back. You mentioned this county is really important to both political campaigns. I will tell you why. This is a rapidly growing county in the state of Georgia. It's also incredibly diverse. It leans blue, but back in 2020, Donald Trump carried about 40% of the vote in Gwinnett County. And ultimately, what Republicans in the Trump campaign were looking for tonight is to see if they could increase turnout just enough where they run up the margins by a few percentage points and hold on to Republican strongholds in the state, and then are maybe well positioned to carry the state. Democrats, the Harris campaign, they were also hoping to up their turnout here so they could create that blue wall Tom has been talking so much about in Metro Atlanta, and a lot of it has been happening in here tonight. Keep coming a little this way, because one of the most significant aspects of tonight that we've watched in here are the early votes, early in-person voting numbers in this county. Over 50% of active voters in Gwinnett County alone voted early. That's either by mail-in ballots or early in person. Back over here, you see all these things? I've been describing them today almost as like trash cans, but what's inside of them? All of the in-person early votes, about 300,000 of them. There was a team of election workers here who had been sequestered since 9 a.m., prepping all of these so they could process and get the early numbers out quickly. Every election official and the supervisor of Gwinnett County elections has told us they've been on track to hit all of their markers to have results in on the earlier side, and they're still working over here tonight. This is where the mail-in ballots will come through and are coming through, and they're sorting all of those. Ultimately, we're going to see more ballots coming from the individual precincts from Election Day to the other side here, where they'll count and go through all of that. The big question here is going to be, what does turnout look like? Did for the Republicans and Trump, did they nudge up what they did in 2020 a little better this year, enough to possibly chip away at Harris's margins and then maybe take the state along with keeping Republican strongholds? And for Harris and Democrats, were they able to reach out to people they described as likely Harris voters who were hard to reach, people who would probably vote Democrat but maybe hadn't voted in past elections? The local county Democrats, they told us they spent a lot of time trying to reach those voters, canvassing, directly targeting ads to them, and sending a lot of mailers in more than a dozen languages to try to get them out. So far, we're told, and you can just see the scale of everything here, the supervisor for Gwinnett County elections, he told us that they are on target right now to surpass voter turnout compared to 2020 by 6:30 today. They had 70% voter turnout roughly in this county. That's exactly what they had back in 2020. So they think they are going to have more turnout in this county. And for both Republicans and Democrats, that's exactly what they were hoping to see. But the big question is, how do those votes fall? And remember, 2020, we saw in the midterms a lot of split ticket voters, Republicans who voted for Republican Governor Brian Kemp, despite Trump saying, hey, that's not somebody I support, and him coming out against him in the midterms, and then voting for the Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock. The question tonight in this county is, could that
He's
happen
up
again?
105 to
And the numbers,
30.
at least in terms of the
Oh my
totality,
gosh.
are inching up past what both campaigns were hoping to see tonight. Savannah?
All right, Ellison, thank you. Gwinnett County's late rallies by Donald Trump there, and that county and neighboring Cobb County. And you got to hand it to the election workers. They're so focused.
That's what I was thinking as I was watching
She
that.
walks right by and they don't even look up. They don't even look up. They're counting the votes. It makes you feel good about democracy
These
at
are
work.
the heroes of the night.
Yes, absolutely.
And there's also a storyline in Georgia about election workers, of course, right? And the threats that election workers have faced in so many of these battleground states. And you look at Georgia, that is the home, of course, of Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, who were two elections workers who came under fire, faced death threats, faced severe hardship in their lives because of those election fraud lies from former President Trump. So these election workers, man, are they doing a civic duty
Oh my
for
God.
everybody?
My favorite part of voting is when I walk in and see the smiley faces. They've got this great task in front of them, and it's.
Well, true. Hug an election worker if they consent.
Yeah.
And it's part of the
Thank you.
story of tonight, though, and tomorrow morning, because they've brought on more election workers in all of these states to make sure that they can count more quickly. I do think Ellison's report was fascinating. Gwinnett County, it went for Clinton by 6 points, for Biden by 18 points. So this is a county that Democrats have been increasingly eyeing, as have Republicans.
Well,
as
we
they
talk
try
about
to
the
win
gender
that
gap
state.
as I go to Senator McCaskill and Sarah Fagan. I mean, I mentioned there were Trump rallies in Gwinnett County. One of them was the one where Tucker Carlson, the former Fox News host, talked about daddy's coming home and going to give a little girl a spanking, like, the sheriff's come into town, which was a message that, if you're trying to reach female voters, I don't know how the females on this panel feel about that, but that's where that happened.
Not good. Don't feel good about that.
Yeah.
I think most women don't feel good about that. But, I come from a state that is very Trump heavy. So I certainly know that there are women out there that have bought what he's selling. I like to say I think there's about a third of the Trump voters that don't believe a word he says, but they really like the idea that their tax cut's going to stay in place, and they think their business interests are going to be better protected with less regulation. And then 2/3 of the Trump voters who believe every word he says and like it just fine.
Sarah, I want to get your thought on something at work right now. And there was a bit of a mixed message in the campaign, the Donald Trump's campaign, about early voting. Yes, do it, don't do it. How do you think that is playing out tonight?
Well, if you look at some of the early vote returns, certainly we saw higher numbers of Republicans voting early. It looks to me like a lot of those were election day voters previously who voted early. Okay, great for the Trump campaign. They banked votes. They can focus on those who haven't voted. So to me, what I'm going to be looking for is his share of the early vote higher than it was in 2020? Democrats dominated the early vote totals in 2020. And, Donald Trump in most of these states was doing 35, not even higher than 40% in any of those states, these target states we've been talking about all night. So does he do 42, 43, 44%?
I mean, in 2020, we were in the midst of a pandemic. Donald Trump was actively telling people not to vote early or not vote by mail, saying he was suspicious of it. To Lester's point, he changed that tune. Now they're actively encouraging Republican voters to go in and early vote, and Republican voters seem to have answered that call.
That's right. It was a huge strategic blunder in 2020 to have done that, particularly in a close race. Had he not done that, perhaps he would have won. So I think he learned that lesson. And also, if you just look at the trends in early voting and the trends in absentee by states, it's a prudent thing to do.
to be clear, the Republican apparatus absolutely made a big push this cycle to get voters out to vote early. Donald Trump himself was all over the map on that. You see it at his rallies. He talks about at one rally, he would say, go out and do it. At another rally, he would cast doubt on the validity of ballots that were put in through the mail, et cetera. Some of that likely seeped down to some of his voters in some of these key battleground states, as we heard from talking to voters in some of these battlegrounds. Remember that this is a former president who, over the summer, you look at, let's say, 20 rallies. At 5 of them, he cast doubt on the results of the election even before votes were counted. That ramped up in just the last month. At 14 of 20 rallies, he did the same thing. So he has not been super consistent on this.
Let's go to Tom Yamas right now. Tom, as we speak, North Carolina, Georgia, and Pennsylvania are counting votes right now.
Yeah, and we're getting ready for poll closings in places like Nebraska, and Nebraska could be the key to it all. And I know what you're saying, Nebraska? Yes. So when you look at our beautiful map here, you see the maps, the states that are red, the states that are blue, and our battlegrounds here that aren't colored in. And then Nebraska and Maine, they have this kind of Where's Waldo effect. When we hit it, here's why. Nebraska and Maine, they both give out their electors a little differently, their electoral votes. If you win the popular vote, you get 2 in Nebraska, and then they give them by congressional district as well. Trump is going to win 2 of the congressional districts, most likely, in the popular vote. But Congressional District 2, CD2 in Nebraska, is a battleground district. And the entire election, I say, could come down to this. Let me explain why. So let's take you to Nebraska and show you where CD2 is. It's essentially the city of Omaha, right? I'm going to draw it for you and then show you the congressional district. It's the city of Omaha, a little bit of Saunders, and then a little bit of Sarpy as well. I should say all of Saunders as well. That's essentially the way it looks, right? I'm going to give you the congressional map so we can cut it out a little more. So this right here, that's Congressional District 2. It's a swing district, as I said. 2016, Trump wins by 6,000 votes. In 2020, Biden wins by 20,000 votes. So why is it important? Because if we come down to that scenario where it's 269, Savannah, I gamed that out. It's going to come down to Nebraska, too. So every vote does matter. It matters so much that we spoke to people in Omaha, asking them about what this campaign was like. They say they've never seen anything like it. They've been inundated with ads saying on the television, on the radio, people calling them, unlike anything they've ever seen before. Again, it likely won't come down to Nebraska, too, but it might, and that's why every vote matters. Again, Omaha, the biggest area of Nebraska, fastest growing area, and tonight we'll be watching it.
Tom, you promised me you would not raise the specter of the 269 to 269.
It could happen. We're ready for it.
It could happen. The Constitution has provisions for it, but can we just all agree? Let's hope we don't get there.
Is that Chuck Todd's music?
Yeah, no, that's it. Is that Chuck Todd's head exploding? Yes, perhaps it is. But you know, it's interesting to see these are such contested races, and it's actually nice to see. I think we've divided our country so much into red and blue. It's nice to see that once you get on a county by county level, all of these states they're not monolithic. There's more to it, and we still do live right next to each other. And Nebraska, too, is a very good example of that.
Yeah, but I would say you're right. We live right next to each other, but the folks that live in Omaha, I guarantee you, some of the folks that live out in a very sparsely populated rural county don't relate to some of the same issues that the people in Omaha think are important. It's much more of an urban area.
There's also a hot Senate race there right now where the Republican was expected, you would think, will just cruise to re-election there, but there's an independent candidate, Dan Osborne, who's really giving a run for her money for Deb Fischer.
Yeah, and I will say that one of the things about the urban-rural issue is when you think about the ground game, I don't think we talk about this enough. The ground game for the Republican Party is much harder. Going door to door in rural communities is a much different operation than going door to door in a densely populated area. It's not as efficient, it's more difficult. Frankly, a lot of folks out in the rural area don't want strangers knocking on their door. They're not used to having people they don't recognize coming up the driveway 2 miles down from their nearest neighbor. So it is harder for the Republican Party to do the ground game, the GOTV, as you talked about earlier, than it is for the Republican Party. But it'll be interesting to see how this independent does in Nebraska. He says he's going to be independent. He won't caucus with either party. He won't vote for either leader. He says his job would be to try to bring the two parties together. It's probably a winning message right now. I just don't know if Nebraska's pretty red.
All right, well, the drama is continuing to build. 3 big battlegrounds closing at the top of the next hour. Don't go away. We'll be right back as we count down the road to 270.
All righty. See, I don't know how long I'm gonna keep the stream on for. They gotta give me some type of. I know Trump is up 70 right now, something like that. But y'all looking at somebody live right now. Trump is up 68% right now. Holy freak. Look at this, y'all. Look at all that red. Jeez, bro. She's getting blown out the water right now. It's never over, but shit.
The story of resilience and please take care of yourself and each other.
Welcome back. It's election night in America, and we're just getting started. Almost 9 o'clock here in the East. We're going to have a bunch of poll closings, 3 big battlegrounds that will close. They are make or break races on the road to 270. We're talking about the presidential race a lot for good reason. As I turn to Kristen Walker and Hallie Jackson, there is also hanging in the balance tonight the balance of power. Who controls Congress? Who controls the Senate? Who controls the House? And we've got some results there.
That's right. And Republicans need 2 seats to win control of the Senate. So far, they have 1 pickup. So let's go to the board. We'll show you where things stand right now. In West Virginia, as we have already reported, Jim Justice has won this seat after Senator Joe Manchin, who is a Democrat, who then switched to an independent, announced he was not running for re-election. This is expected. It is the first Republican pickup, so that makes this significant. We can call that Rick Scott has held on to his Senate seat in Florida handily. He first won this seat back in 2018. This was one of these races where reproductive rights was a big issue. Former Congresswoman Debbie Mucarsel-Powell trying to make that the big focus of the race, but it was not enough to get her over the finish line. We're watching this very closely. The Senate race in Ohio, too early to call. Senator Sherrod Brown looking for a 4th term against former car dealer, Trump-backed businessman Bernie Moreno, so we'll watch that closely. Pennsylvania, another big battleground. Senator Bob Casey with 67% of the vote. Dave McCormick with 30.4% of the vote. Too early to call with just 13% in. Let's take a look at the big picture here. Again, Republicans have now picked up 1 seat for the Senate at this hour. 42 to 33. We'll continue to watch this
very quickly. Hallie, taking a step back, the Republicans need 2 seats, and this is a map that is very difficult for Democrats to hold on to their Senate races. They're on defense in a lot of these states.
Yeah, and the reason for that is likely Montana. This is the other pickup that Republicans feel very confident about. They think they'll be able to get. I will tell you that Ohio Senate race being too early to call is interesting. I talked with one Senate Republican source who said, you know, they would have loved to see that call an hour ago, right? They would have loved to have had that in the bag, these 2-seat pickups earlier in the night, Savannah. But we'll wait and see how this one goes.
Okay, we are just coming up the top of the hour. We're going to have some major battleground poll closings coming up. And we
Michigan
continue to come,
and Wisconsin, Arizona, all coming up. So this is the drama beginning to clearly build right now. The votes are being counted, and again, we'll get those closings here very shortly. Let's check back in with the presidential race and the road to 270. All right, it is 8:51 in the East, and here is where we stand right now on the road to
105 to 30. It's cool. We good.
And it has been a night of big surprises so far, with more to come. We're now just
Are we
minutes
good?
away from additional closings.
Yeah, we are, and we see that map starting to fill out, so we will watch for those next poll closings. It's in all corners of the country now, almost at 9 o'clock in the East Coast, and they're some of the biggest states to close yet.
At the top of the hour, a major round of poll closings with the most battleground states of the entire night.
15 states and 163 electoral college votes up for grabs, including 3 critical swing states.
Will Vice President Kamala Harris hold on to the blue wall that cuts through Wisconsin
Good evening, Wisconsin!
and Michigan?
Michigan, we are not going back.
Or will former President Trump break through like he did in 2016?
We are going to win Wisconsin.
Plus, the first Western battleground, Arizona, moments away from closing.
A very big hello, Arizona. We love you, Arizona.
Arizona, we need to fight this battle on every front.
We are standing by for our first vote count in from these make-or-break states as our decision desk gets ready to make new calls on the road to 270.
Many votes to be counted, battlegrounds all coming in. Michigan has 15 electoral votes up for grabs, a key state, and Jesse Kirsch in Detroit for us today. Jesse, the polls are just about to close, moments away. What do you expect? What are you hearing?
Yeah, so Savannah, statewide, they close at 9 p.m. Eastern, but here in Detroit, in the East Coast time zone, the polls have been closed for almost an hour. You can see this ballot drop box is sealed off here. However, despite all of that, we're going to move down the block here. This is the city elections office. And what we've got going on here is people who have been in line well past when the polls officially closed to continue registering.
6 minutes, I'll be back, yo.
Inside, it appears we do still have some people in that line. We had people telling us they'd waited in line for around 4 hours. One young woman told us that she almost got out of line because of that duration, dealing with logistics as well as just waiting to be able to register to vote, but was ultimately able to do so. Someone else told us that they got out of line because of the wait. If people got in line by 8 p.m. Eastern time and they closed the doors here at that time, people were going to be allowed to go through the registration process, and it seems people are still going through that at this hour. This is a traditional Democratic stronghold, the city of Detroit. However, when we've spoken to GOP operatives in the state, they tell us that they see Vice President Harris's base as, quote, crumbling because of various headwinds. However, there are other potential headwinds that could send traditionally Republican voters toward the vice president. We will have a clearer answer as those results start coming in at 9 p.m. Eastern. Savannah, back to you.
And we'll get a better idea about turnout, too, which is all important for the Harris campaign in Detroit and also those collar counties. Well, we want to switch over. Let's go to Arizona. The Mountain West polls closed. Gotti Schwartz, they're outside a polling place. Have you seen a lot of crowds?
Yeah, polls close in about 6 minutes here. This is the end of the line, and this is about a 60 to 70 minute wait here. So you got the people that are at the end of the line right now, probably about 300 to 400 people in front of them. You're noticing a lot of MAGA hats here talking about the gender divide. Gender divide is very much in play here at Arizona State University, and there's been so much talk about low propensity voters. One of the things that we've been noticing here and talking to students about is the involvement of fraternities. Normally, fraternities, they may not be organizing and may not be turning out to vote as much as you'd expect, but here at the ASU campus, it does seem like the fraternities have been involved in turning out the vote, and those that we've been talking to say that they are turning out for former President Donald Trump. We've also talked to a lot of other students that have been coming out for policy issues. There are several props. The issue of abortion is extremely important in turning out the vote. Immigration is also important, but I gotta say, just eavesdropping what people have been talking about in line, it's been surprising how often the topic of the Joe Rogan podcast keeps coming up. We've talked to several students now who say that they listened to that Joe Rogan podcast with the former president, and that was the deciding factor for them. And they've also said that if the Kamala Harris, the vice president of the United States, would have appeared on that podcast, cast, they may have had their votes skewed. It's really interesting because, you know, some people are talking about policy. Others are talking more about kind of like vibes. Well, I like the vibe of Trump, or I like the vibe of Kamala Harris, but it's not so policy specific. But that's just some of what we've seen. We're almost to the end of the line. We just wrap around this corner. But again, right now we're in Maricopa County. This is a county with 2 point something million voters. ASU has 74,000 students here, most of them voting age. So what we see here at Arizona is going to be very important in this election. Back to you guys.
All right, Gotti, thank you so much. Abortion on the ballot in Arizona, also Florida. Lester, I know you got a key call here.
Yeah, we do have a call here in the state of Florida that abortion, that would restore the constitutional right to an abortion there, but it had a 60% threshold and will not clear it. So amendment for right to abortion will go down in defeat. 86% of the vote in there. Let's
This is super interesting. I'll just drop in here to say this. Okay, it was yes to protect in Florida, but you are seeing it needed a 60% threshold, as you said, Lester. This would be the first ballot initiative that we've seen anywhere in the country since the overturning of Roe versus Wade that has failed. However,
but it had a higher bar.
Exactly. The other ballot initiatives were not this high of a threshold here. And I see you want to jump in.
No, it's just the same number. Right, it was 57, 58 in Ohio, 57, 58 in Kansas. I mean, I think we know what the number is. Ironically, I've talked to some Florida Republicans who secretly had hoped this would pass, because now Florida elected officials in 2026, which is their big election year, they will have to face the voters on a 6-week ban, and then suddenly that will sort of upend just the state's politics.
Yeah.
But
Ron
there's clearly
DeSantis actively campaigned against this amendment which is
and he used the government power. It's going to create an interesting, there's going to be a fascinating, if the Democratic Party ever wants to have a chance in Florida again, they're going to get an opportunity, ironically, because this thing went down tonight.
Think about how complicated this was for former President Trump. I asked him about this. He said it went too far. And then he was asked about it repeatedly throughout the course of this campaign. Well, how are you going to vote on this? And he was shifting his positions in the weeks leading up to this very vote. So it sort of underscores the point that Chuck's making. This is a very complicated
This issue has Republicans in knots and Donald Trump in knots, and now it lives to see another day in Florida.
And this is why the vice president and her team have been pushing on this issue. It is on the ballot as well in Arizona and Nevada. Trump orbit folks that I'm talking to think that there is a likelihood of perhaps ticket splitters in those states, people who will back these abortion ballot initiatives, but who will also back former President Trump. But you have seen the vice president hammer this in the state of Georgia. She went to the state of Texas, which nobody really thinks is going to flip blue on the presidential race, but she wanted to use it as a stage to highlight that state's controversial restrictive abortion law. She did it in Georgia with Amber Thurman, and in Florida, she talks about it as a place that she is concerned about.
We don't have a ton of time because we're coming up on a poll closing, but in Iowa, whose polls are going to close, there was a late election poll. Iowa just had a very restrictive abortion ban pass, and this shock poll on the eve of the election had Kamala Harris carrying a red state. So it's just a very potent issue.
Not to overread into it, but it is an indicator perhaps, and the pollster there, Gold Standard pollster, thought perhaps the abortion issue was motivating these older white women, right? A demographic we've been watching tonight.
And Chuck, well, let's go to the election and we'll move right here as we get some more poll closings here. We can give a few more characterizations. In just 3 seconds, all of these states will see their polls closed, and we'll begin counting the votes. Here is state of Texas, which we were just talking about. Donald Trump will win in the state of Texas when all the votes are counted. NBC News projects that Donald Trump will also win in North Dakota tonight. South Dakota, same story. That will also go into the Donald Trump column this evening. We move to the state of Wyoming. In 3 electoral votes at stake, Donald Trump, the projected winner in Wyoming. Here's the map. The road to 270 now getting interesting. 154 for Donald Trump, 30 for Kamala Harris.
All right, let's go to the uncalled races just from those 9 o'clock poll closings, including New York, Colorado, Minnesota. So we still await results there. But let's go to Michigan. That's the biggie at this hour. Polls closing in Michigan, and it is, wait for it, too early to call.
Waiting for perhaps into the wee hours. Yeah.
Arizona
Shit.
also too early to call. 7 o'clock.
Bro, I'm not
Mountain
watching
West,
this for
9 o'clock on the
fucking
East Coast.
12
Polls
hours.
Just closed there. Let's go to
I
Wisconsin.
understand, but damn.
The other of the blue wall states, along with Michigan and Pennsylvania, too early to call. And speaking of Pennsylvania, too early to call.
Too early to call.
Sure. But we could be waiting a bit for that. And same with North Carolina. They're counting more.
Yo, I might
votes,
end
but
the
it's
stream.
still
I
too
gotta
early for us to make
fucking
a
do shit.
projection. And in Georgia, it's not too
I gotta get the
early.
fuck out of
It's
here.
just too
I'm leaving
close.
my house.
We are starting to
So I
see
can't
the
keep
vote
the
come
stream
in with
up.
that 66%
Jesus, what time
counted
is it?
right now. And yet, despite the
9?
margin that you see there, we project
Freak,
not
man.
only what the margin is right now, but where we expect the vote
All
to
these
come
too
in,
early
whether
to
it's coming
calls.
from a Republican stronghold or a Democratic stronghold. So when you see that disparity and then you see us say it's too close to call, there's a method to that madness, Tom, and you've got Georgia up there.
And I'm going to explain the method to the madness, right? The difference right now, 220,000 votes. Trump on top with 66% of the vote.
Projected winner
Republicans, it
for
can't even get close to
Delaware.
celebrating just yet. These sort of UFO objects we have circling Georgia right now, this is the remaining vote. And the bigger that bubble, that means the more vote that is out. And the more vote that is out right now is in the Atlanta metro region. Remember, I told you guys earlier that about 50% of the vote is going to come from this area right here. The election is essentially won or lost in the Atlanta metro region because the margins are so close. Every vote matters, but because the margins are so close, Trump runs up that rural vote. The Democrats run up the urban vote. They run up the suburban counties around Atlanta as well. Let's take a look. Let's see how Atlanta and the surrounding counties are looking, the ring counties. Cobb County, 77% of the vote is in. Harris slightly overperforming where Biden was in 2020. Let's go over to Fulton County. This is where Atlanta is. A huge county for Democrats here. She's about where Biden was, 72% of the vote in. She can catch up and bring that up. Gwinnett County, again, these are the counties that Clinton flipped in 2016, and they just got bluer and bluer. And you can see what's happening here. 16% of the vote is in, but she's at 60. Biden was at 58. Let's keep going around here. Douglas County, 84% in. Here we go. Harris overperforming in that county. We'll come a little further out. Rockdale County will kind of move a little out the suburbs, the exurbs, if you will. 69%. Look at where Harris is tonight. 74%. She's running up that vote in the Atlanta metro region. If she can keep that momentum going, she could possibly take the state of Georgia. But again, we got to wait and see. I want to see how Trump is doing in some of his rural counties. 78%, 95% of the vote is in. So 78% in 2020. He's at 78 right now. Let me go to a neighboring Towns County right here, 81-80, and then in Union, 81-80. He seems to be hitting his marks too. I want to hit some sort of swing counties, if you will. Dooley is one of these. Trump won it in 2016, but if we go back, Obama had it in 2012. Tonight, Trump is up. He's building on his margins from 2020. That's a good sign for him. Let me see if Peach County is in. Peach County is another one that no vote is in. This is one of those swing counties, not a whole lot of voters, but it usually sort of picks the winner. We like to watch it as we go around. Muskogee, this is 72%. This is one of the ones we're watching to see if Trump could make inroads with black voters here. Harris seems to be comfortable.
He's up 154 to 30.
Watermark where Biden was in 2020. So guys, still very close in Georgia. As we said, too close to call. It was about 12,000 votes that separated this in 2020. Trump won this state by about 5 percentage points in 2016. The state is definitely changing, and the reason why it's changing, it's in this Atlanta metro region.
Yeah.
Go
in
for
North
it.
Carolina, I'd love to see some
let's
North
go for it.
Carolina numbers. I mean, these numbers are coming in as we speak.
Yeah, let's hit North Carolina. Again, we're going to look at all the state. I'm going to be looking at Mecklenburg County. This is where Democrats have to drive up the vote. Only 6% is in, but we can see how she's performing here. You know, 6% is in. I'm not going to really draw too much from there, but she's overperforming Biden. We go to the research triangle here. Wake County, 76% of the vote is in. We compare her to Biden, 62 to 63. She's doing better. I know a lot of the vote is in. Over here in Orange County. This is UNC Chapel Hill, the research triangle. You have medical research jobs, high-tech research jobs, affluent suburbs, highly educated Democratic voters. 86% of the vote is in. Let's see how she compares to Biden. Slightly overperforming Biden, not by much, but look, any little increment makes a difference when you're talking about a 10,000 vote difference at the end of the day. Right now, the difference is about 41,000 in that county. Trump is on
54
top right now.
minutes?
The rural vote. We can check out some of his counties over here.
All right, listen, y'all.
Western North Carolina, Graham County. These are some of the counties.
I gotta
that
get up out of here,
affected by
man.
Hurricane Helene and all that devastating flooding. 95% in, 81%.
Really hasn't been that long,
in
but it
2020
has.
was at 70%.
3 hours.
Kind of
Shit.
overperforming. The big unknown was how many
Going
people
live,
were going to
bro.
actually vote in here. And
I've been live for 3 hours, y'all. Ain't nothing really shaking. We did get some information. Trump is winning right now.
Trump's area that was affected by
But it's all good. It's always time for a comeback. You never know. But I have to stop streaming right now. I'm gonna make a video in the morning comments and update y'all what happened, even though y'all gonna know before me
changed
probably.
the rules, so you could actually vote
But,
in other counties
yeah.
if you couldn't vote
Yeah,
in
get
your
out
own
here, man.
county. It looks like turnout's okay.
Peace
We heard
out,
that
peace
from
out.
Sam
Love y'all, love
Brock.
y'all, love y'all.
Asheville is that blue dot in the sea of red in North Carolina. Again, affected by Hurricane Helene, 55% of the vote there
I don't
in
even know if I
Buncombe
ended the live
County.
yet.
Biden was at 59. Harris is
Probably
overperforming.
didn't.
Again, any advantage she has. In
Love
the
y'all,
counties
y'all.